And welcome to our special called meeting as an update on homelessness. I will call us to order. Before I turn to Assistant City Manager Fernando Costa, I'll just do a little bit of level set on behalf of council today. We've talked a lot about this issue, as does every major city in the country. Today is intended to be an important update on various policies and investments the city of Fort Worth has made, also with our partners at Tarrant County and TCHC. But importantly, also a conversation about where we need to head into the future. We do not think this is about being reactive or quick fixes. These are large policy decisions this council needs to continue to make because you've all been committed to the right level of investment, both in housing and services for those that find themselves homeless in the city of Fort Worth. And I think there's a lot to be proud of that Fernando and Tara and the team will walk us through today, but also to be interactive. So this council will have ample time during today's workshop to ask the right questions and push on staff and our community partners that are here joining us today as well. We know that this is about building on decades of progress and an issue that has evolved substantially just in the last 5 years, especially after COVID, and now that we sit in 2024. And so I just want to say, first of all, thanks to this council colleague. I've been around city government now for over 10 years, and I think this is the most committed council to this issue. And when it comes to affordable housing projects or making major investments, you've really listened to staff leadership over the last several council sessions and made the right level of funding needed, but there's still more to do, of course. So I hope today's workshop is helpful to each of you. I know staff has worked very hard, especially Neighborhood Services and Tara Perez. And with that, I will turn it over to Fernando Costa to kick things off. Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you, Mayor, for that beautiful introduction, and good morning, council members. Thank you for setting aside time today for a discussion about a complex and difficult issue for our community. As the mayor was suggesting, since the end of the pandemic, homelessness has become a more pressing issue in our community, has become more prevalent in many ways, mainly because federal funding for emergency rental assistance has diminished. The moratoriums on evictions have expired, and at the same time, housing costs in Fort Worth have continued to climb, pricing out individuals and families from their homes in some cases. And so it's a more prevalent issue. It's also a more visible issue because it's no longer so heavily concentrated only on East Lancaster. You see homeless folks in other parts of Fort Worth, not only downtown and the near south side, but up on North Beach and out on Camp Bowie and other parts of Fort Worth, where historically we haven't had such a large incidence of homelessness. So it is more visible, and it's more prominent in the minds of local residents. In survey after survey that we conduct in city government about issues that are important to our residents, homelessness usually rises toward the top of the list. It's something that our residents want us to address. And yet it's something that not all residents fully understand in all of its complexity. And that's what we want to discuss with you today. We want to share with you data on homelessness trends and talk with you about various ways in which we can address this important issue. Now, as challenging as the issue is, I think it's important to note, and the mayor made reference to how cities across the country are struggling with similar issues. I think we could even say, Mayor, that as you go to meetings with your counterparts from big cities around the country, most of them have even more difficult problems than we have here in Fort Worth. We have our problems, but I think you're always happy to come back to Fort Worth, knowing that we're on top of our problems to a great degree. we are doing better than our most big cities, not only nationwide, but here in Texas. In Texas, there's only one big city that's doing better than we are in respect to the rate of homelessness, and that's the city of Houston. They are actually a national leader in addressing homelessness. We'll talk briefly about Houston today. Not that we should emulate everything they're doing, because there are unique circumstances that don't lend themselves to equal consideration, but we can learn lessons from Houston and from other cities across the country that have had some measure of success in tackling this issue. And I think much credit, in fact, most of the credit for Fort Worth's success, as far as it goes, belongs to a network of community partners who are well represented here today, and many of whom, several of whom will be asked to speak in today's workshop, and all of whom will be available to answer questions that may arise. There are roughly 40 different nonprofit organizations in Fort Worth that play a significant role in addressing homelessness, either in respect to short-term strategies, helping get people off the street and into emergency shelter, or even more important in the long run, solutions that involve the development of affordable housing and permanent supportive housing and the various services that people need to succeed in our community. So our sincere thanks go to our partners, without whom we could not make much progress in addressing homelessness. And so today, Mayor and Council, we'd like to talk with you about a short list of goals. We'd like to provide you with a broad overview of homelessness issues, focused on hard data surrounding those issues. We'd like to recommend some new initiatives for your consideration to reduce homelessness in Fort Worth. No quick fixes are going to solve the problem, but there are significant things that we can do to make it less prevalent and less visible. We'd like to hear various perspectives from our partner agencies, and then we'd like to facilitate discussion among council members. This is largely for you as elected officials to discuss our options and give us the benefit of your guidance. Our agenda for today, following my introduction, will begin with remarks by Assistant Police Chief Robert Aldridge about short-term strategies. The police department is one of several city departments involved in addressing homelessness on the street, along with the fire department, code compliance, environmental services, municipal court, and others that I'll leave out if I keep trying. But these departments work closely together, and nobody provides better leadership on those efforts than does Chief Aldridge, and so we're happy that he's prepared to talk with us about it. And then we'd like to talk about long-term solutions. Tara Perez, who's a manager of Directions Home within our Neighborhood Services Department, has been leading our homelessness activities for several years now and does an excellent job. And our good friend Lauren King, who leads the Tarrant County Homeless Coalition. This is the umbrella organization. I don't think Lauren can tell very many people what to do, but when Lauren speaks, people listen and they respond. So we're happy that Lauren is here. She is as much of an expert on this subject as anyone in Fort Worth. And then we've got our community partners. You know these folks: Steve Montgomery, Mary Margaret Lemons, Susan Garnett, Toby Owen, Artie Williams, Bruce Frankel, and Kim Robinson, all key players in the homelessness picture. And then I'd like to come back after council discussion to summarize our next steps. It might be helpful as we begin this conversation to review a brief history of homelessness in Fort Worth. Homelessness has been around as long as Fort Worth has been around. Many years ago, back in the late 1800s, in the south end of downtown, roughly where we are now and around the Water Gardens, we had an area of Fort Worth that was known as Hell's Half Acre. And it was given that name for a good reason, because it was known as the rough part of town. It's where the cowboys on the Chisholm Trail would stop for rest and recreation and engage in all kinds of activities. As it happens, a natural byproduct of that circumstance was cheap housing. There were rental residential hotels. There were boarding houses. There are lots of places where folks who otherwise would be homeless at least could find a place to live. And in fact, Don Schisler, I don't think Don Schisler was there then, but the Union Gospel Mission was there back in the 1880s. That institution has been around a long time, helping folks in most need of help within our community. And we're very grateful to Union Gospel Mission for its longstanding leadership. That was way back then. You'll notice even on this lithograph, some sites, you can see the railroad tracks which arrived in Fort Worth in 1876. This was just 10 years later. You can see how the city had grown up around the railroad. You can see a street called Rusk Street. You can see it labeled on the map. Rusk Street was so rough in those days that the Russ family came to the city council and asked for the street to be renamed. They were embarrassed by the activities that are occurring there. And so it is today known as Commerce Street, as renamed by the council back then. So fast forward nearly a century to the 1970s and 80s. The city leaders decided it was time to clean up the south end of downtown. We had a wonderful gift in the form of the water gardens that helped to complement the convention center. And the community, not just city government, the community began to move homeless services over to East Lancaster. We lost a lot of cheap housing. Around the same time, on a national level, we had a trend that became known as deinstitutionalization. Folks with mental disabilities were taken out of large institutions, and with the expectation that communities would provide adequate support for them. But that didn't succeed fully, and a lot of folks became homeless. The Union Gospel Mission moved to East Lancaster in the late 70s with their main facility, and the Presbyterian Night Shelter, represented here today also with Toby Owen, opened in 1984, all around the same time. So the modern era of homelessness could be traced back to the 70s and 80s. Moving forward, I think we owe considerable credit to former Mayor Mike Moncrief for adopting solutions to homelessness as a major theme of his leadership in city government. And he helped to launch an effort to establish a 10-year plan for ending chronic homelessness in Fort Worth. The plan became known as the Directions Home Plan. That name has stuck, and we continue to refer to our organizational unit addressing homelessness as Directions Home. That plan was adopted in 2008 with the goal at that time of ending chronic homelessness by 2018. Of course, that did not happen, has not happened yet, but it's still within our reach. We had at the time what was known as the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Homelessness. And eventually the city council created a task force on homelessness. They made as much progress as they could. They recommended that we focus on permanent supportive housing. The council then established a task force on permanent supportive housing, which led to much of our work toward the development of permanent supportive housing starting around 2015, working with the Fort Worth Advisory Commission on ending homelessness. We found, though, that we were struggling with a split. Some folks were following the Directions Home Plan, other folks were following the Continuum of Care Plan for an area that consisted of Tarrant and Parker counties under an entity, the Continuum of Care, which received and allocated federal funds for addressing homelessness. So we decided that rather than working with two plans, we'd just recognize the continuing care plan as the principal guidance for addressing homelessness. And so in 2019, we worked with the continuing care as staffed by the Tarrant County Homeless Coalition to adopt a community-wide strategic plan for ending homelessness. And that brings us more or less to the present day. The annual point in time count of the homeless, which we just conducted recently, is the, pardon me, the most definitive source of data about the magnitude of homelessness in Fort Worth or in any city around the country. And you can see from this graph how the homelessness trend has gone up and down over the years. Way back in 2005, you saw that the city of Fort Worth, the blue bars on the graph, had a homelessness number in excess of 3,500, with the continuum of care, Tarrant and Parker counties exceeding 4,000. That was the largest number that we've had. That number has declined over many years. You see a slight increase in 2013, 2014, but then continued decline, and then substantial decline when COVID hit. When we began to receive the emergency rental assistance funding from the federal government, and were able to enjoy the benefits of the eviction moratoriums. So relatively low levels of homelessness in 2021 and 2022, but a big increase in 2023, a slight reduction in 2024. These are not final numbers now, they're still being polished, but we believe that the general trend is reliable, that we have seen a slight reduction in 2024. So you can see how significant the issue is. We'll go into it in greater detail. The city has been responding in allocating resources to address homelessness, both operating funds and capital funds. The operating funds have come largely from the city's general fund, although we do get funding from other sources. And you can see on the blue line that the operating funds have been fairly steady over the years, but never higher than they are today. In fact, for the fiscal year 2024 budget, under which we're currently operating, the city manager just last August, in his recommended budget, put forth a proposal for new funding to support the homeless. And so we have the highest level of operating funds that we've ever had in the general fund. We've also taken advantage of one-time federal funding opportunities that came to us through the CARES Act and ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, to allocate considerable funding to develop affordable housing and permanent supportive housing in support of the homeless. So you can see those big jumps in 2020, 2022, and 2023. The council, in its discretion, has allocated a great deal of funding for the homeless as a consequence of these opportunities. I mentioned the fiscal year 2024 budget, in which we realized significant increases across multiple budget accounts. We have additional funding in the current budget for rapid exit housing, getting folks quickly off the streets and into suitable housing, permanent supportive housing, case management, providing the services that folks need to be successful in their housing, cold weather shelters. In the cases of emergency, we need places for these folks to stay. Camp cleanups are a great benefit to neighborhoods that are most directly affected by homelessness. Those funds go both to code compliance and to environmental services. We have the HOPE team, which consists of folks from both police and fire. Both received additional funding so that We can work longer hours. Homelessness is obviously not an 8 to 5 problem. We need folks who are available to respond whenever the need arises. And so all told, well over $2 million in additional funding for the FY 2024 budget going toward the homeless. I'd like to call upon Assistant Chief Robert Aldridge now to talk with us about short-term strategies to address homelessness in Fort Worth. Chief?
Thank you, Fernando, Mayor, Council. It's an honor to be in front of you today to talk about this issue. I've been very fortunate to be a part of this since I was a captain in Central Division, so this isn't new to me whatsoever. The HOPE team, you know, it's consistent of the police department, the fire department, Day Resource Center, MHMR, the counseling from MHMR. And really, you have to go back a few years whenever Chief Davis kind of approached us and said, hey, you know, I have this unique idea. It wasn't probably unique to him, but I mean, it was unique to the city of Fort Worth to have fire personnel assist the police personnel on the HOPE team. He was noticing increased number of ambulance runs to the emergency room, increased emergency room patient population from the homeless population for minor stuff, things that could be taken care of in the field, and saw that, you know, they could be not only a great asset to help minimize some of the issues that are happening in the corridor, but also they could prevent some of those treatments and leave some of those emergency room beds open for the people that actually really need it. So most of you are very familiar with the My Fort Worth app. And kind of whenever I want to get started here is that homeless and panhandling are two separate total things. Not all homeless are panhandlers, and not all panhandlers are homeless individuals. So we're talking about homeless camps right now. So you guys are very familiar with the homeless or the My Fort Worth app, but you guys get reports too. We get reports through our 911 system. So we get reports through a lot of different methods of kind of reporting these camps. If you look at this chart, this kind of is a flow chart of kind of how we clean up camps. It's a life cycle, if you will. We get the complaints. The HOPE team, along with the Day Resource Outreach team, they go out, you know, they receive the complaint, they add it to their list, they go out there, they warn the individuals, time to leave. They start providing referrals. They start, you know, providing some services that maybe these individuals might not be aware of. And then they, you know, go back to the camp. They provide the legal notices going, now it's really time to leave. We're giving you a time frame to get out of these camps. The code compliance officer goes out there. They provide those. We schedule with environmental services to come and clean up the homeless camps. They clean them up. We remove the litter and debris. You can see at the top of this chart, we cleaned up 927 camps in 2023. And over 3 million pounds of garbage and waste from these locations. You can imagine that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. I kind of equate this to kind of squeezing the balloon, because we will clean up one camp, these individuals will move a quarter mile, half mile down the road, and they will set up camp again. So I will support Tara in her efforts for permanent supportive housing until the days are gone. Because that is the only way that we're going to get some of these individuals off the streets and out of these camps, causing our communities concern. So as you guys know, it takes a village. It's not just us. It's not just the police department. It's not just the fire department, although we are the boots on the ground. We are the ones that kind of interact with these individuals quite a bit. We rely on code compliance, environmental services, neighborhood services, the municipal courts. They have a special court just for the unhoused population. It's not all about fines. Parks Department, we work with them, coordinate with a lot of the services that we provide there. And the Office of Emergency Management, whenever we have cold weather days or excessive heat days, to have overflow shelters. You guys know we can't arrest our way out of this problem. I mean, it's a problem that is a city problem. It's not a police problem. It's not a fire problem. We're definitely going to be here to do our part. We're going to do everything we can to help answer the complaints and to help provide services for these individuals. One thing I do want to say for both the HOPE Police and Fire, enforcement is our last option. You know, our whole goal is to connect these individuals with services, whether they're veteran members, whether they're just people that are down on their luck. I know in past presentation, you guys have heard this quote, you know, a large majority of our population is one paycheck away from being homeless. So not everybody that's in this situation are bad people. They're just on bad times. So our whole goal is to provide them with services and resources that can help them get to a better place. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tara.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, before you take off, Chief Aldridge, I wanted to ask a question. Okay, so we're, based on the number of camps cleaned in 2023, 927, so we're doing more than 70 camps roughly per month, if you want to break it down that way,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Have we, with our homeless partners, ever done heat maps of homeless camps? I realize that
Yes.
many are transient in nature, but do we have that you can share so that, I mean, I know where a lot of them are in my district, right?
Sure.
A lot of us probably have the same type of knowledge, but it would be helpful for me to kind of know where the reoccurring spots are.
Absolutely. We can provide those for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is just a general expectation that I have today, and I'm sure my list will grow, throughout this morning. But there are some people in our city who wish the homeless population would just vanish, just disappear. They don't even want to see them or acknowledge them. And so I'm really interested in hearing what our external partners have to say in terms of how we can get the general public to engage even more and get ideas from those of you who are the real boots on the ground. And that's one expectation I have today. I think that will result in a more compassionate public. Some people are just going to be evil no matter what. But, if we hear from our partners out there, what do you think we can do? I think it'll make this a stronger conversation.
Thank you, Gina. Charlie?
Hey, Chief, thank you. I'm with you as far as the enforcement goes. Last resort, we don't want to make a problem worse for them. But, those 927 camps that were cleaned, like you mentioned, a lot of them are probably duplicates of just moving down the street. What about those who aren't accepting resources, who won't accept resources? Obviously, we can't force someone to accept resources, but if they're going to continually set up the same camps, they're the same individuals. On the law enforcement side, can anything be done, or other cities, are they doing anything to help?
So most of the other cities has the same challenges as we do because they, the law is pretty clear. I mean, we can't just go arrest people. We have to warn them. We have to give them the opportunity to vacate. If somebody refuses to vacate, that's a whole different story. We can make a custodial arrest, and we have in the past. They're just not that many because most of them do move along. The reality is that most of these individuals that are unhoused and are in camps, they don't want to be seen or, interact with anybody. They think they're far enough in the woods or far enough in the parks. Unfortunately, they're not. So if they continue to move the camps, we continue to chase them around and do the same process over and over again.
Any other questions for Chief Aldridge? No. Thank you, Chief.
You bet.
Tara Perez is up next.
Mayor and Council, Tara Perez with Neighborhood Services. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you here today on some of our city long-term strategies regarding homelessness. Wanted to start with just a recap of some of the prior permanent supportive housing projects that this council has supported and invested in. Casa de Esperanza was taking advantage of a lot of COVID federal funds to create 119 units of permanent supportive housing. And the Quail Trail project was a very interesting initiative, 12 pinwheel quadplexes that really looks like a single family as you drive past. And this also housed 48 chronically homeless folks. With ARPA funding, the city again invested a lot in building permanent supportive housing and also units for homeless families, which is our first foray into that. After a few different requests for proposals, these are the projects that were funded. As you can see, a lot of them are underway. These projects will bring 139 PSH new units and 64 new family units. And that was funded at an average of $129,000 per unit. One of the goals in funding permanent supportive housing projects and also homeless family projects is to not have them concentrated in one area, but instead throughout the city. One general rule, though, is we do try to stick very closely to public transportation. But as you can see, these are scattered throughout council districts and throughout the city of Fort Worth. Wanted to lift up that the city was not alone in these endeavors. A few years ago, Fort Worth Housing Finance Corporation committed $5 million as matching funds with private foundations in Fort Worth. And so the last of these two projects in the pipeline benefited from that. And we have several new foundations participating. One question we get asked frequently is, how do we compare in Fort Worth? So what this is it looks at the large cities in Texas and compares our rate of homelessness. So one way to do that is just compare homeless people per 10,000 persons. So what it shows is that Fort Worth has the second lowest homeless rate in the state of Texas for large cities. We're behind only Houston. I'd like to take a minute to talk about some successes we have had as a community. I'd like to ask my colleague Lauren King to join me for this part. In talking about the successes of Fort Worth, it's important to understand that this is not just city successes, but this is a whole system and a partnership. So some of the things that have made us successful are, one, the city having a very close relationship with Continuum of Care, with Lauren King and her team at Tarrant County Homeless Coalition. If you want to reduce homelessness, it's hard. And if you're always trying to act with a sense of urgency, it's difficult. So connecting once a month doesn't get it done. So Lauren and I work together extremely closely to align our funding priorities, to fill in each other's gaps, and to support each other. Lifting up a couple things, Casa de Esperanza with Mary Margaret Lemons and Fort Worth Housing Solutions has become a national model. One of my favorite moments when I was talking with someone from Houston, who's the leader in all things homelessness, when he expressed his jealousy about Casa de Esperanza, it made my day. He says, people in Houston are still asking him, how did Fort Worth do that so fast? Our rapid exit program, again, this is a partnership. This was birthed through conversation with Toby Owen many years ago. As Upspire employees got employment, but then were staying in shelter for a long time to save up to actually get into housing, that birthed the idea of rapid exit, how we take employed families, give them one-time assistance, and get them on their own. And I'd like Lauren to share a few more of our system successes.
Sure. So I wanted to share with you all because I think often we get questions about, did you see what this city's doing or did you see what that city's doing? And to let you know that people also do call us and say, oh my gosh, how did you all do that or how this happened? So just a couple things. Strong partner cooperation is a huge thing. I absolutely could not do anything without these guys over here. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate all their work. They're the boots on the ground. But we have other communities call us a lot to say, how did you do this? Or how is your continuum of care board structured? How do you get buy-in from people? I mean, and honestly, the biggest thing I will tell them is trust. You have got to build trust with people to get them on board. And so I have those conversations. Most recently, I had it with someone in Pennsylvania. We also did a new housing assessment. One thing that Mary Margaret and I talk about a lot is that there are other cities around who they like to talk about stuff. So they talk about how this might happen or what we might do. And I will say for us, we typically jump in and just say, we're going to do this and we're going to figure it out. So if it doesn't work exactly how we thought, then we'll kind of back up and try something different, but we're just going to try it. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to, we're going to make sure it makes sense, but we are going to get out there and try it. And I will say that has really benefited us. A lot of this, like jumping out there and doing things, especially when it comes to resources, if we're able to spin down or put things to use, then the entities, HUD, the state, whoever, will come back to us and say, you guys did a great job at this. Do you want more? To which I'm always like, yes, please. Any more resources, we will take them. One of those examples, though, is a new housing assessment. Years back, we were using kind of a national assessment, and a lot of research was coming out about how ranking people for housing was not the best way to do that. And so we got together with partners and said, okay, let's create our own assessment and figure out what we need here. One thing that we discovered was that our assessment was not actually telling us what type of housing people needed. So if you all said, what should we build? I don't know that I could have told you at that point in time. Now we're using a much different assessment and different ways to prioritize people for housing. So that's something we're really proud of. We presented nationally on that quite a few times. I mentioned use resources and get more. So we do that a lot. We like to jump out there and really put things to use. A couple other things that we get calls about a lot is landlord engagement. So we know that as much as it might sound like we can build our way out of this, another thing for units is access. And so we have a team at the Homeless Coalition, and they focus on access. So they are constantly making partnerships with landlords to help them understand what it means to give someone a second chance at home, to help them mitigate anything that goes wrong, to help work with case managers and landlords, all the things, but to help get access to those units as well as build new ones. So we're doing both of those things. It's not just a one or the other. So we get called a lot about that. And then also diversion. So in the past, I think it really used to be people have it, and people may still have this idea that people, if someone's experiencing homelessness, they go to a shelter and they wait. And they're on the housing wait list, and then they may get into housing. For us, we've really taken the idea of a list and turned it on its side and said, not everyone needs permanent supportive housing, nor should we make them wait for that. And so how do we help people help our partners get people out of homelessness as quickly as possible? So with diversion, that is literally saying you just became homeless. What can we do tonight to end your homelessness? Whether it be reunifying them with a family, if they came here for a job and that didn't work out, helping them get back home, whatever that looks like, how can we get you out as quickly as we possibly can? We're very, very committed to that. So those are just a few things that I wanted to let you know that the Continuum of Care and the Homeless Coalition also gets calls about, and people want to know what we've done and how we did it.
Thank you, Lauren. And some of our challenges are related to growth and just the rental market right now. We've seen sharply increasing rental rates, lack of unit availability. We also deal with a very high voucher rejection rate in Fort Worth, about 78%. That combined with some high eviction rate and the COVID funding disappearing, those are all big challenges for our system now. Wanted to spend just a second, I know Fernando mentioned Houston. Houston is not only a leader in Texas, but they're a national leader. And again, wanted to lift up a few things they're doing, not that we need to emulate everything, but there are some good things that we are doing and that we have learned. So the first one is just the Houston market's a little different. They've traditionally had higher vacancy rates. So when you have more vacancy in apartments, easier to get people in. So that's kind of a natural geographic advantage. So they have a close relationship with Harris County, and they often invest large sums of money together on projects. One thing they did, and this is when their mayor was Anise Parker, is they prioritized federal funding for homelessness. One thing to note, Houston is unusual in the state of Texas in that they don't invest any general funds. And so because they don't do that, they went another route to be able to find funding that could be used for homelessness. Many years ago, talking about 10, 12 years ago, their system was a mess. HUD came in, did a lot of technical assistance, got their data, got their coordinated entry back on. Just wanted to show, they made a huge initial investment. This was in 2013. They braided together a lot of funding sources for not only services, but also for building. But they continue to do that today. Rosemary's Place, my understanding, broke ground in late 2023. Again, showing that strong partnership with the city and the county, as well as with tax credits. There's a very good book that came out in 2022 called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. And I think it's very relevant to the discussion today because that's a big issue we wrestle with, is what causes homelessness? The question this book seeks to answer are, why is there such a variation in rates of homelessness across the cities, right? San Francisco has a very different rate of homelessness than Chicago, than does Detroit. And we all hear people's ideas on what causes homelessness. Poverty, mental illness, drugs. And what this book does is that they look at the continuums of care and the rates of homelessness, and they see which of these factors correlate with where the continuums of care fall. And the two things that they find that correlate are rental rates and vacancy in the rental market. This is what it shows. In areas where the rental rates are high and where there is very low vacancy, you see lots of red dots. That's continuum of care. A lot of California continuum of care that have very high rates of homelessness. One thing I specifically wanted to point out, because I think that there is a big disconnect. I think that you can hear folks like myself and Lauren talk about homelessness is a housing problem. But then when we go out into the community, when we're driving, when we're walking, and we look around and we see some folks experiencing homelessness that obviously have some severe mental health issues, it prompts the question, what is causing the homelessness and what should we do? The book, Homelessness is a Housing Problem, uses the idea of musical chairs. So for example, you've got 5 folks and 4 chairs. One person is not going to get a chair, okay? And when you ask that person, so here's our little woman on the walker. If you ask her, why didn't you get a chair? She's not going to say there's not enough chairs. She's going to say, because I'm disabled. In interviews with people who are experiencing homelessness, when people ask them sometimes, why are you experiencing homelessness? Sometimes issues about mental illness and drugs, as well as personal tragedies, are mentioned. Because on an individual level, when we compare ourselves to each other, the reason we didn't get space is because we're disabled, right? But big picture, when we look at it as a system, we realize that the real reason is because there's not enough. This is what our housing market is. When there is not enough housing, the folks that are the most vulnerable get squeezed out. Recently, the city did a housing affordability strategy. One of the things that came out of that study were that there were 32,000 households that are cost burdened right now. So 32,000 households are paying more than they should for housing, making them vulnerable. I did want to add, one of the things that we are exploring are some solutions about how to get housing on the ground faster. We're currently in conversations with other departments about ways to expedite not just permit supportive housing projects, but also projects with a majority affordable units, and ways to waive all the legally eligible fees. Part of the lesson in homelessness is a housing problem is that the key for cities is elasticity. They use San Francisco as an example. When they had a huge population surge, their housing could not keep up with that surge. One of the, I think, few examples of success they cite is Charlotte. Again, experiencing a big population surge, but there was elasticity in the market, meaning they had geographic space to build, but also they didn't have high regulation barriers. And because they didn't have those high regulation barriers and a good geographic area, they were able to scale up. And it really mitigated that population growth. And so these are both ways to try to get housing on the ground faster to mitigate that.
Carlos. And
Terry,
council,
thanks.
just so you know what we're going to do, we're going to let Tara finish her section, and then we'll pause and take a lot of questions before we go into Lawrence, if you want to wait. Okay, go ahead, keep going, Tara.
Okay. A few months ago, I had, in probably a week, meetings with several different neighborhoods and groups that were concerned about concentrations of homelessness. One of these meetings was called by Councilmember Beck and held at Broadway Baptist Church, bringing together businesses, folks from homeless services, city leadership to talk about issues, particularly where mental health and homelessness intersect. Out of that is birthed the idea for what we're calling the high impact pilot, which is to really hone in on 7 severely affected areas of Fort Worth with targeted mental health and housing resources. And I think earlier, Councilmember Flores, you asked for a heat map of camps, and that's what this is. This is based on citizen camp complaints from the My Fort Worth app for several months. As you can see, we have several different heat spots. The initial 7 areas we would like to target are in various council districts. As you can tell from the heat map, there is a cluster of homelessness near this downtown Central City area. And so several of those neighborhoods are in that Central City. The idea of this is not to target enforcement, but rather to target services. Services paired with housing. So there's really 2 parts of the pilot. One is establishing what we're calling the Housing First Act team, which is high-level treatment team, psychiatric and also medical care. They specialize in just serving severely mentally ill clients, and they work as a team. So this is not about referrals. This is about the whole team works with all 80 folks to provide directly for their needs. We think accompanying this with housing assistance, because housing assistance is needed to give people a stabilizing platform. Mental health services, while someone is still homeless, are not nearly as effective as giving mental health services while someone is in housing. Now, one thing it cannot do is there is no force. You know, people will be offered the opportunity for services and housing, and if they say no, they will continue to be offered those opportunities for services and housing. But it's not something we can force folks to do. What we're looking at is a 17-month pilot, but trying to start this year as soon as possible to provide these services for severely mentally ill clients and housing. We anticipate that on March 19th will be the mayor and council communication about this potential program. We would like to be contracting with MHMR, which would hire the Housing First Act team personnel. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Tara. I think there's lots of questions from council. I'll start with Carlos, so just move around. Raise your hand if you have questions.
Thank you, Tara, for the presentation. I have, I think, maybe 2 or 3 questions. When you gave the example of this, of Houston, you say that less regulation, creates more housing opportunity. I interpret that as being less zoning regulations. Is that accurate?
I've talked with folks in Houston about this. And one of the things they point out is that Houston does not have zoning, but Houston also did not have zoning 15 years ago when they were one of the worst homeless systems in the nation. And so they had to put a lot of work in getting their homeless system data good and functioning, working together, and a lot of resources. How that does help them now is a bit easier to put projects on the ground.
When it comes to height and density, I
Yes.
see those as probably
Yes.
categories that most impact what we're trying to do here, right? And
Yes.
again, generally speaking, right? Zoning definitely has its place, in orderly city planning. I support that, not in any way, shape, or form suggesting, hey, just, throw it out with the bathwater. Not saying that, just to be perfectly clear. Okay, jumping over to the high-impact pilot, the heat map that you're referring to, wanted to make sure I didn't mishear. Did you say that that data collected was only collected from using the My Fort Worth app?
Yes.
Okay, so anyone sending an email or directly calling, the Hope team, those kind of
Thank you.
communications would not be reflected in that, right?
No. But in looking at the 7 areas, I did take that into consideration. My office gets a lot of calls and emails from citizens that are outside the My Fort Worth app. And so we did take that into consideration in where the issues of homelessness are the most pressing.
Yeah, I know that I've seen it for a fact, and Northwest Division can attest to that. I get reports, a lot of people just send it to the council member. I'm happy to, float it up to the proper points of contact. Around the Stockyards area, around North Side, up that North Main corridor, there are a lot of camps.
Yes.
Didn't see that up there. I don't know why, maybe it hadn't, caught on yet to use the My Fort Worth app for that. But I just want to point that out because I didn't see District 2 there. Then my last question, point in time homeless counts, very important. I know in the past, some of us have participated in that. It does give us an on-the-ground view of, the realities of homelessness. The 2020 census also did that to an extent, correct? I mean, didn't they have folks deployed or at least contacting you all? Because I seem to recall they did it 2 ways. One, they counted the number of people receiving supportive homeless support, right? And then they also counted the number of people living outdoors. And maybe that's the second category that I'd like to get some detail on. How do they do that? Did they deploy their own folks, or did they just call us, for example, here in Fort Worth, and talk to our partners and say, hey, what kind of count did you get?
Okay. I can find out that information for you.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Charlie?
First of all, thank you for what you do every day. We've had a few conversations before, and you know where I stand on most of these items. For the permanent supportive housing, you get the emails all the time. I get the emails all the time. For you always see the articles that, why it doesn't work. And then for every article that says why it doesn't work, there's one that says how it does work. So what would you say to that as far as how we can make sure that it continues to work because it's managed the right way here in Fort Worth? What would you say to those folks?
Well, I would say, how are we measuring success? How are we measuring performance? So from the homeless system point of view, what we're looking for these projects is, this is a group of high needs folks, right? Most of our homeless population doesn't need permanent supportive housing. It is just for those that are disabled. Often they have multiple disabilities and or chronic health conditions. And so these are folks that are hard to serve. What we look at is being able to, one, get them into permanent housing. And the biggest factor for us is keeping them in that housing stability. What we know that while permanent supportive housing is expensive, it's much, much more expensive for them to be homeless. And so the length of their stay and whether they exit to the street or whether they exit to another housing option, that's our main performance measure. Other things we look at are increases in income and increases in well-being. So at one site, we have a lot of on-site personnel for medical and for mental illness. And so those are the things we look at. Are people staying in housing and not returning to homelessness, income, and well-being?
Awesome, thank you. And then on the last slide about cannot force the severely mentally ill clients. Now, I assume that's not going to be the case if they're a danger to themselves or others. I'm sure they would get,
of course,
medical treatment, right? So I'm just trying to preemptively answer some questions I know I'm going to get. And then if they're not mentally competent to make decisions or adequately care for the housing that we're providing, as far as being good stewards of those tax dollars, and if they can't provide for it, I assume we'd find alternate solutions for those individuals. And I'm sure we're talking about a very small subset of their overall homeless, but I know whenever I see severely mentally ill, how severe is it to the point where can they adequately care for housing on their own? If that makes sense.
Right.
So.
And I'll distinguish this, and then I'm going to, we have Susan Garnett from MHMR here also, as well as Chief Aldridge, if they want to add to this. So you're right. There are certain things that if someone is a danger to themselves or others, where laws kick in, things can happen. The problem, though, is that there's a lot of folks that have severe mental illness that are not a danger to themselves or others. And the options there are extremely limited. And so just trying to emphasize that point.
Awesome. Questions, council, on the row? Macy and then Elizabeth and then Chris.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you to everyone who's a partner in this, because you're right, it takes all of us to solve this. My observation, and as I went through the whole presentation, and I kind of want to preface this because I know we have more people speaking, but it seems like we're hyper-focused on housing. And while that's one solution, it's not a solution for everyone. And my hope is today, too, from the other presentations, I wanted to hear more about mental illness, substance abuse, and how can we help these people get out of poverty? I mean, I know that's an issue, and I know you had on your slide, that's probably not the main issue for Fort Worth, but just providing housing and not giving them the tools to get out of homelessness and get out of poverty, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And so I want to make sure that we're going to talk about that today, too.
Right. And a lot of times when we're talking about housing, we're talking about housing and services. So when we talk about permanent supportive housing, it's not just the housing unit or rental assistance, but it's the long-term services that go with it. So I think one of the questions is just, is there an order? Providing services and then housing, or housing and providing services? And so different communities have different approaches. But what's shown to be most effective is, again, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Housing provides that stable platform. For some folks, housing is enough. Like for some of our families who are homeless for economic reasons, just rental assistance is enough. But you're absolutely right. So for some of our folks with very high needs, housing is not enough by itself. And that's why we provide those wraparound services and connect them to the mental health resources they need, or physical health resources they need.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to come up, but I just like.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to give you an example outside of permanent supportive housing that we're trying right now. So hopefully you all know that we received a grant from one of the Bezos Foundations, and that is specifically to serve families. So one of the things that we're trying is actually with our rapid rehousing. So that's families who need, or Bezos specifically for families. So that's families who need 6 to 18 months of assistance to help them get back on their feet again. And we are going to try for higher needs families to actually set additional services that focus on financial capacity, self-sufficiency on top of that housing assistance. So they have a housing case manager. And so we're going to set that on top and see how it goes, how it works, what some different outcomes are. Just what you said, can we help families move out of poverty and not be in a constant cycle, even if they don't ever fall back into homelessness, but how do we help push them into financial self-sufficiency? So that's something we're trying right now, and we recognize that. And so, yeah, just wanted you to know that.
Thank you for that. And then I had 2 more questions. One on the high impact pilot. Are we talking about 80 people annually that we're going to help with $1 million, or is that 80 people at any given time within the system?
So generally in the ACT team model, one of the trademarks is very high intensity. So they have a case manager load of like 1 to 10. So it's 80 people max that one team can effectively treat. And so there is some flow off of that. And so, for example, someone may present as very high needs, but they get into housing, a few months into housing, and they are no longer very high needs. They just need a lighter touch case management. And so we are working with MHMR so that we have a fluid model that can allow that. But this is the initial taking 80, and then it will be as people cycle off to put in another 80. I know in Philadelphia, they have their Pathways to Housing program has had a lot of success. What they've done is they just scale up. They now have 8 ACT teams to deal with that issue.
Okay, great. Then my last question really is more going back to the housing first. Judge Glock is with the Manhattan Institute and the Cicero Group, and he is focused on, his podcast is on, yes, housing is a wonderful solution, but we also need to make sure we have that balance of providing those services. And then at what point do we keep spending so much money, keep adding housing? The population will continue to grow. So it's not a long-term or a permanent solution. We're continuing to provide housing. And I guess I want to come out of this discussion today with all of our partners is, at what point do we stop putting money into permanent supportive housing and look at other solutions? Or if there's no other solution, how do we find that balance with city dollars, federal dollars, and then with the community at large?
Well, I think locally, but also nationally, I mean, permanent supportive housing is a best practice. And you're right, permanent supportive housing costs money, but it pales in comparison to the cost of homelessness. So we can stop housing programs and building housing. That's going to result in extremely high homeless cost. You can put some over here, or if you don't, put a lot over here. And so it is a best practice. And I'll note that, obviously there are critiques of Housing First. I think it's important to note again, Houston, national leader, Housing First is their model. And they're often cited examples of the success of Housing First. Because what they did is they did not go after something new and shiny. Their approach is actually kind of boring, but it works. And they invested a lot of money in housing and in services to get people in housing and be able to keep them there. And so I think there's lots of proof that Housing First and permanent supportive housing work. Houston is just one of those.
I'll add too, just to give you an idea, it is permanent, so people can stay on forever in theory if they need to. Our average stay for permanent supportive housing is 53 months. So we try to do a lot to get flow in our system that if people don't need services anymore and they're on Social Security disability and so they're making, $800 a month, they need a rental subsidy. Like there is no housing here that meets their need. And so if they just need that rental subsidy, figuring out how to do that, they cycle off. So we have about 20% turnover every year. So.
Jeanette, keep going, I'm just gonna go down the row here. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. My question was on the 40 high impact clients. So those are just single individuals, families would not go into that number, right?
Right now, our community has some other resources, as Lauren's mentioned,
Bezos, yeah.
the Bezos Foundation that's solely focused on families. So this resource is more focused on individuals. Most often, when we talk to people on the ground in areas of high concentration of homelessness, it is more individuals with mental health issues than families.
So you probably already have a good idea of like those individuals that people call on frequently throughout the city, I guess frequent flyers, but so that would be a good service for them.
It's actually, so we're working on a couple different things. Lauren and her team are taking the lead on high utilizers, so folks that use like MedStar and JPS a lot. There is some overlap with this high impact pilot. And what we're looking for in the high impact pilot, when we talk with neighborhood police officers who are some of the best resources, on the ground resources for knowing who's in their area and experiencing homelessness, is talking with them about people they see over and over and over again and people they suspect have severe mental illness. And so those are the two things that we're looking for when we talk with them about referring people to this program. You're welcome.
Gina.
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking around to make sure Mark McDaniel was here, and he is. I was a beat reporter in San Antonio when we opened the doors of the institutions, and homeless people became homeless. It's my first time seeing people sleeping in cardboard boxes downtown San Antonio. It really had a very big impact on me. I'm going to misquote the Bible, but it says something like, the poor will be with us, always. So I don't think this is a problem that we can totally solve. I think we need to strive to do the best we can and celebrate those wins when we see them. David, I think you need to have every department focusing on all the problems. That T-shirt you had, everybody works for DJ. Well, I don't want to cause any problems for DJ, but what I'm thinking about is the neighborhood improvement strategy. And this will take bigger brains than mine. And I don't know how many Six Sigma black belts we still have here at the city. You're our first bragging on one that you hired, wasn't real impressive. But I know that people, well, it just wasn't. I know that if given the proper, problem, there are people who can solve this. But I would like to see us incorporate the homeless issue into our neighborhood strategy. Because if you think about it, when we first started taking out foundations that were left, that's where the term detriments to development came about for me. Because even though we were bulldozing houses left and right, if you left that foundation, that added like 5 to 10 grand on a builder who just wanted to build a house. But we were able to recognize that because we had boots on the ground looking for problems. And so I think if there is a way to incorporate the needs that are identified from this problem that we're diving into today, I think neighborhood improvement strategy would be one good point to start. And let's see, Tara, my heart goes out to you because I know you wear this on your heart on a daily basis. And I talk to Mary Margaret all the time. Luckily, she's an attorney, and we don't get into a lot of trouble. But there are people who really, really try to solve this problem. But there are people who really don't care. And so what I'd like to know from you, because you've mentioned your engagement with landlords, and you mentioned that in a very positive tone, but I know that there are some real turds out there, okay? So what I want to know is, do you track the interaction with landlords when it comes to permanent supportive housing or any goal to address this problem? Do you track them? Do we know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are? And how do we handle them? And where does code compliance come in with their training, of landlords? Is your top topic included in their trainings, or do you know?
So I'm going to defer that to Lauren because she's hired a landlord engagement team at Tarrant County Homeless Coalition that just focuses on that issue. I mean, I think you're right. One of the things that is a challenge to us is, that 78% of landlords reject rental assistance. And so that makes it even more important, the investment that Lauren has made in getting a specialty team for landlords. Lauren?
So I can talk about, do we track? Yes, we do. We actually use a software called PadMission that tracks which landlords take our assistance and what type of assistance they take. But we also, we blacklisted one last week. My housing director's back here. Could we use a closer relationship or figure out what that connection to code is? Yes, probably. It will be what I say. And I will say, just to let you all know, the majority of our permanent supportive housing is actually scattered site. So we do have, quite a few single sites now that are coming online, but the vast majority is scattered sites where landlords are just taking that throughout the county, actually. So yes, we track them. Yes, we know good ones and bad ones. They actually, before they're considered a landlord partner with us, they sign an MOU stating that they will do certain things. It also gives them access to risk mitigation funds from us should something happen to the unit. So yes, we do track. I'd be interested. We need a better connection with code probably to give them information if that's something council is interested in.
Well, I'm wearing my code compliance shirt today in case you hadn't noticed. I can connect you with people in code and make sure that they are on your team because this is very important and code is the answer. One more question, Mayor, if you don't mind. Do you ever have a situation where you run into a problem, and this is for you too, Tara, and you say, boy, if we just had this connection, or if this didn't happen? I'm trying to find out, where is it that the city can be a better partner with you in resolving problems?
So I would say it depends on what the topic is. If it's programs and services, if I just had this, building, yes, there's a lot the city can help with building. So, and helping,
is that in terms of design, building permits, and getting things approved, what have you?
Expediting things in general, yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have zoning, and we like it here.
Well, it's not even that. They're all past zoning.
Okay, okay.
Signing contracts, getting funding, adding on random things that developers have to do, that sort of thing. So there's no expedited process, even though, in a previous meeting, we talked about any project that has city money in it gets expedited, but that has not been the case for us.
Okay.
And that's based on, to be clear, Homeless Coalition does not build or own any housing. This is all based on my partner experiences and kind of what they come to me to say, hey, we're all dealing with this. Can you go and talk to someone about how you can help move this forward?
Interesting, David and Mark. I'm sure y'all heard that. Okay, I don't want to take over everything, but thank you. You want to add anything, Tara? This is a safe place, okay? This is your moment.
It's a safe public meeting.
What'd you say?
I'm good.
Okay, okay.
Chris?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question about, I think it was slide 23. It was about the Rosemary Place. And so when I'm looking at, I see that this was a contribution of city dollars and county dollars. The 18 million, was that for this one particular complex?
Yes.
Okay. So when I go and look at the Direction Home capital funding on page 8 and 9, and I see about the dollars, I guess, capital funds and operational funds are right at 14 million. Do we have any other budgeted dollars that goes towards, because we have done projects like the page I just explained, the Renaissance Renaissance Heights, but it wasn't 10 million, it was only like 1 million. And so, or 2 million. And so I'm curious is, do we have the dollars budgeted to do something like this in our budget now?
At this time, I would say no. I don't know of any sources right now for future permanent supportive housing projects. I think we received a lot of federal dollars through ARPA and have deployed a lot of that into projects that are in process. But to my knowledge, I don't know of any capital for PSH that's available right now.
When we get the capital, does it only come from this funding source?
We welcome capital from anywhere.
But historically, no. On slide, whatever number it is, you gave an ARPA housing pipeline. We utilized ARPA dollars to the tune of 41 million. And I guess Chris's question is really, in the past, we've typically just used general fund dollars or coupled those with some grant funds, federal grant funds. We have not done one of that scale out of general fund. So the question is, where would that come from if we did a project like that?
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And it was Housing Finance Corporation.
There you go.
Funds that were the initial kickoff, the matching 5 million of Housing Finance Corp with the 5 million private that started like Quail Trail. And that's been in several of the projects.
But it was never to that scale, Chris.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, only why I ask, I know we was trying to get those dollars, and I was working with Fernando and Victor. I mean, it was like pulling teeth because we just didn't have the resources. And so as we move forward and we figure out how we can, I mean, you showed a good model here, but how do we do that if we're not planning for it? So in the future, we're going to plan to put more dollars in, because we're not going to get any more ARPA dollars, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, so are we planning, I'm just kind of throwing this out there on the table, we're going to be planning to put more dollars to do key projects like Houston did?
I would hope so. I don't think that's my decision to make, but I would hope we would invest in housing more aggressively. Yes.
And we'll talk about that today, Chris, for
Okay.
sure. I need to, yeah. Elizabeth.
Thank you. I do have some overall funding questions that I think align where Chris and Mayor were going, but I'm going to hold off because I know, Lauren, I think you're diving into that a little later. Tara and Lauren, what I heard in your presentation was two different things. One, the landlord engagement project that you have underway, and then the rate of high voucher rejections. And so relative to Texas, because I think it's federally and state law that often governs evictions, are any other cities doing anything with respect specifically to evictions to help prevent homelessness? I know we had the eviction moratorium that is lifted, but is there anything other cities are doing to continue some sort of program that helps alleviate this?
Yes, I can put together some materials. More often, it's on like a city or a county level that people are trying different interventions around either voucher acceptance or eviction prevention. But I can put together a list of what some other folks are doing.
So legally in Texas, there are some things that we can do to help as a city to help mitigate that.
I don't know about, I'll say, speaking from our experience with working with different JPs, is there much you can do to impact how evictions are processed? Not necessarily. And actually, here in the county, it depends on what JP you get. There's some that are super tenant friendly and some that are super landlord friendly. So evictions are not necessarily processed across the board. The other thing I'll say is that Tarrant County evicts a lot of people. We're one of the highest evictors in the nation. We evicted about 40,000 households last year.
Did you say 40?
Yes. And we actually track, so one of the things that we do to prevent returns to homelessness is we get the eviction list each week and track that against who's been served, because people who've been homeless are most likely to fall back into homelessness. So we're trying to reach out and catch them before that happens. And right now we're sitting at about an average of 1,000 evictions a week. That's just where we are. We were like, when it hit 900, we were like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe this, but it's about 1,000 evictions a week, just to give you an idea. And I will say, across the country, you may look at and see states have put, this goes more to voucher acceptance. Oklahoma has a law where you cannot discriminate based on source of income. The state has kind of tied y'all's hands because they actually put a law in place that says cities can't pass that ordinance except for veterans. So we were working with some different things. The other thing I'd say about evictions, so I'm kind of jumping around, is that evictions don't necessarily equal homelessness. So when we look at homeless prevention, we're really looking at how to target that really well, because obviously 40,000 households get evicted. 40,000 households, thank goodness, do not experience homelessness each year. And so really looking to see, and that's one thing the Homeless Coalition is starting to work on, is going upstream to say, okay, what is the tipping point for someone in our community, and how do we target that group to try to maximize those resources the best we can.
Okay, thank you. So then my next question is, if we are allowed as a city to put in an ordinance specific to veterans, do we have that? And if not, how quickly can we get that? Do we currently?
That was at the state level, right?
So, but we don't currently have that on
correct.
an ordinance on, okay.
Correct.
And so I'd like to ask legal to bring that back to us on how we can potentially put that in place if we're allowed to do that. I think we should. Next question is, you mentioned that Houston prioritized federal funding, and this was under their Mayor Parker, which was far before ARPA dollars were on the table. So can you tell me what federal funding they used to prioritize that? And if we also have access to that funding, and if the answer to that is yes, where are we putting that instead of how Houston did it?
Okay, I'll try to break that down. Tell me if I don't answer everything. So Houston used several different streams of federal funding. So one was CDBG, one is home. I think one of the big differences in looking at the federal funding Houston receives, first of all, they receive much larger allocations year to year. But they also benefited, I'm trying to remember the time period. I want to say like over 7 to 10 years, they received $500 million in disaster funds, in federal disaster funds. And they used a lot of those disaster funds in their homelessness projects. But I mean, again, received about $500 million in disaster-related funding.
So then let me interrupt you there and ask, so obviously all of our home dollars goes towards homelessness because that's homelessness dollars, correct?
Well, no, sorry. So Directions Home is the general funds, right? But then home, the HUD dollars, that is for all of affordable housing,
Okay, and so.
all of affordable
So
housing.
did Houston put their home dollars towards affordable housing and homelessness, or did they focus it on home?
They
I'm
focused
sorry,
it
on homelessness.
They focused it on homelessness.
Okay. And then CBDG grants, do we give CBDG grants towards homelessness in the city of Fort Worth?
No.
Okay. I see Victor standing next to you.
Yeah, but there's a good reason why, like you hit one over here, and what we do give CDBG to, and that's where Victor can step in.
Right,
This is the
so-
hard part of
yeah,
comparing
so-
us to Houston, because it's not that easy to compare
Gotcha.
us, yeah.
My question to you, Victor, is why?
Yeah, so let me back up to Houston. I'll bring you up to that question. So our regular allocation of CDBG, Home, ESG, and HOPWA, which are the 4 programs that we get every year, is about 12.8 million. Houston's is 52 million. So they get 4 times the amount, and their population is about 2.5 times ours. The disaster recovery money.
Can I interrupt you there? So if is it not tied specifically to population, if they get that much, how do they get more?
It's a big formula that HUD uses. Poverty is part of it, population is part of it, your housing conditions is part of it. It's a lot of things, but POP is part of it. But they get way more than we do.
Thank you.
And Tara and Lauren mentioned the disaster recovery money. Yeah, Houston has been behind in trying to spend that money for a long time. If there has been a direct impact to housing units that may have been permanent supportive or homeless units, that's how they can kind of make up that amount with the disaster recovery money. And we're gonna look for some creative ways that we can do some of that as well.
Do we currently use our disaster, because I know we've received some as well, right, for our ice storms, et cetera?
We just got the agreement signed like within the last 2 weeks. We have an action plan that's on our website that talks about how we have to use it.
Okay.
And
And is there any plan on copying Houston's model of using some of those disaster dollars towards homelessness?
If we've had homeless units that have been impacted by the storm, one of the things in the disaster recovery program, you have to use FEMA data, Small Business Administration data, State Insurance Department data to show a correlation that there was some housing loss. So we'll stretch that as best we can. And the other thing I think Mayor mentioned about us using CDBG, we once did. However, whenever we take away from one area to put in, we have nonprofits that do public service stuff. We have a cap on the amount of money we could use CDBG for public services, 15%. So we have a balancing act there. So that's why we mainly use emergency solutions grant money for homeless activities.
Okay, and then the Houston funding for the disaster, I'm assuming that they had that same prohibition or requirement that it had to be connected somehow. The housing had to previously have been homeless or affordable?
Part of it
I'm
is
not-
that, part of it is that if you've lost housing units, you can use a disaster to replace those housing units. If there has been some impact to some existing homeless units, you can use the money for that. And then they have another clause in there where it's called mitigation, where we can use like 15% to do some creative things. And I sent an email earlier today that we're gonna look to do that.
Okay, so we are gonna look to carve out that 15% in our disaster funding
To
as well?
stretch as best we can to see how we can address homelessness as well.
Okay, it just seems to me if Houston is the standard, and this is how they have concocted it, I'm sure that they have the exact same constraints that we did, right? Limited CDBG dollars, if you take from one, you give to the other.
Somewhat. The disasters in Houston were, hurricanes and
Sure.
things. We had an ice storm.
Right.
So it was a big stretch to even.
Yeah, I'm going back to the CBDG money and I get the disasters, right? They are on a scale that, thank God, we are not. And quite frankly, we don't want those dollars if that's what it takes to get them. But for the CBDG and whatnot, I mean, I hear your argument, right? That if we rob from Peter, we're paying Paul and vice versa. And so we want to be very cognizant of that. But I can only imagine that Houston was under the same constraints when it comes to spending that. And they somehow manage to thread that needle. And so if we have this example, this roadmap that we know worked, we know that they're in the same state, so they are under the same set of state and federal laws that we are. If they can do it, I think we can do it. And so that's my charge to y'all, is to really see how they did it on that granular level, so that we can replicate that to the best extent.
Yeah, and we've been doing some of that, and I'll give you an example. Casa de Sueños, we put 1.5 million in CDBG. We only get 7 million in CDBG. Houston gets
Sure.
4 times that. So that's the big difference.
So, and then I have one more follow-up on that, and then I think I'm done with my questions. If that is a formula funding level that is prescribed to us by HUD, and that somehow needs to be changed so that the distribution of those funds is a little more equitable based on needs, let us be your partners in that. We need to know what that is as we set forth our legislative priorities for the city, both at the state and federal level. If we know that, then we can push to have that change so that we can see more resources flowing in, more specifically federal dollars. So I'd like a follow-up on that, and maybe even our next legislative committee meeting, we could have a discussion or a presentation on that from your staff.
Sure.
Thank you for that. And then my last issue is just really to my colleagues here to talk about the that high impact program that you heard Tara talk about today. And that really did come out of a conversation amongst folks in the near South Side, and then our partners, the hospitals and their police departments, MHMR, the county, and business leaders. And I know I feel it, and I bet most of y'all do here as well. We have homeless in the city, and being homeless is not a crime. Being mentally ill is most of the time not a crime. But I bet you can name them, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 people in your district you know by name. And they don't get those services that they need, and it is because of a severe mental illness. And so getting to them is much more difficult, but quite honestly, the resources that they're sucking from us and from PD to go out and have to handle them, and from our business owners and our residents, are pretty significant. And so I know that that is a really, that's a pretty high dollar amount for the number of people that it's going to serve, but I truly believe that if we make this run at those our worst case scenarios, the people that we're constantly getting those phone calls on, that you will see a level of consternation about homelessness decrease in our districts. And so I know that's an MNC, and that's just my ploy to this table, or to support that when it comes forward.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions, Gina?
Yeah, I just have a question. I can't get back to my agenda. Are we going to hear from Mary Margaret, or do I need to call?
No, you will. Yes, we're going to break for lunch after this. Get y'all, there's nothing worse than a hungry council. I can speak from experience. And then we'll come back to our next presenter. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Macy.
Sorry, Chair, I had 2 more follow-up questions. On slide 18, I'm looking at the permanent supportive housing projects. How many caseworkers do we have dedicated to those? I think what I'm getting at, do we have the right number of caseworkers to provide the right level of service to the clients that are in those?
Okay. I think opinions on that might vary. I think we've been using an intensive case management model, which is about 24-to-1. This works for a lot of our folks, but that's part of the reason behind the ACT team, is because while a lot of our folks are successful in permanent supportive housing, probably about 10% are very high needs. They need more than just a regular case manager. And so the beauty of the ACT team is it's called like a hospital without walls, is that they're able to pick up some of those folks also. So some of our folks now in PSH, but needing a higher level of care, will also be able to benefit from the ACT team.
Okay. And then one of the challenges I know we've addressed before is lack of emergency shelter during the cold months and with the intense heat. And what can we do as a city to make sure that we're providing the right more shelter. I know you have lots of partners across the city, but I always feel like we're at capacity at those months when we really need it. So what can we do to help you make sure we can get these people off the street and get into emergency shelter?
Talk to Don Schisler.
Talk to Don Schisler.
So we are always looking for locations. We rely on a lot of our internal and external partners to help us find locations that have that kind of availability. What we're asking from folks is a lot, to be available from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. for 5.5 months for us. And so that makes it a little bit difficult to find spots. But we do have folks working on trying to find good locations so we're able to shelter people.
Tara, go to slide 33, and this was kind of coming off of Elizabeth's support for this new ACT high impact pilot. So roughly, you're looking at $9,200 per person for 6 months, correct? And I know that some of the service levels will be different based on need there. You've got 80 for severely mentally ill, and then 40 high impact for housing. Am I reading that correctly? Okay, if you go to the next page on page 34, and some of this we can flush out when you do the M&C, but for 2025, 2.4 million, or how many more people are you serving over that year? Are you just gonna double the client services based on the 6-month pilot if we think it's working?
So not all, so as MHMR hires this team of professionals, they will be bringing on clients. They're not going to all be brought on at the same time because a lot of this is going to be unit location, getting people interested in the acceptance of housing and services. But it's to fill up that caseload to 80, and that caseload will remain about 80.
Okay, that's helpful. And I'm sure, and we can talk with Susan about this afternoon as well, but if you're MHMR and you're trying to staff that level of professional for a 6-month pilot, the M&C is likely going to have funding for a 6-month pilot. We're not making commitments for FY 2025. So I'm just thinking the way we're communicating with MHR during that time period so we're not leaving them hanging will be immensely important as a partner.
You're right, it's very important. One is just having a 5 or 6 month pilot is not going to be enough to have the data that shows us this is extremely effective. So we're thinking about this in terms of like looking at the data for 17 months, which means that we would need funding for FY 24 and 25.
So that will be what the M&C is for. Is that the plan from city management? Yes, is why David just said yes. Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. Very well. And then you don't have to pull back up the slide, but reflecting on our projects in the city, utilizing mostly ARPA dollars, I think it's interesting the way the city has tried to knit those PSH projects. We've dispersed them across the city, but you've also done some, you might be 7 units out of 40 total or just PSH, or you might do a standalone PSH project that really fits the neighborhood. I think Quail Trail is a good example that Carlos Flores worked on really closely with him on the design of what needed to happen. I haven't seen the one in Houston, but I may just go see it myself just to see it in person. That feels pretty big in scale, and it's a pretty expensive project, but maybe they're doing something that's really warrants that level of funding. I don't know. And then just wanted to thank Victor, who I know will have to stick around this afternoon, but I appreciated it is not apples to apples with Houston because of level of funding, and it is complicated. There's really not a city that you can point to that's exactly the same. So just keep that in mind as we have this dialogue this afternoon. You could pick up Houston's model and try to put it here and it wouldn't work because we don't have the same level of money coming in from the federal government. So,
And Mayor, can I say one thing so we went to visit Houston just to kind of learn some lessons. They've been doing single site PSH for a long time. And they actually give us a hard time because their thing is like, Lauren, you're never going to 50 unit your way out of this. And I'm like, okay, but 150 units, like, is not going to work for us.
Yeah, and they don't have zoning.
We're going to have to 50 unit our way out of it. And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, like, that's, okay, great, if you want to put them everywhere, but like, that doesn't work here.
Yeah,
So
good point.
we need to do what works here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have lunch, so we're gonna maybe break and come back at 1. Does that work okay? All can eat? Yes? Any problems with that? No? Okay, we'll adjourn for 20 minutes. Okay, we'll move along. Lauren King, you're up next. Thank you so much.
Hello, council. I was going to say I'm happy to have you after lunch, but hopefully you're not too sleepy, but I'll keep you awake here. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how we respond and that sort of thing. So this is our homeless response system, and we consider this whole system entities that are important. So at the top, we have stakeholders. All of you all are stakeholders, city, county, churches, businesses, really people experiencing homelessness. Anyone impacted by the issue of homelessness, we consider a stakeholder. The leadership is COC board, the Continuum of Care board. I'll go into more about who is on the board and represents Fort Worth in just a minute. Continuum of Care board, Leah King is currently the chair of that board. Steve Montgomery, who will be speaking to you shortly, is the past chair. And so they set the strategy and direction for where we're going with homeless response. The backbone organization is the Homeless Coalition. The Continuum of Care board is a planning board, and so the Homeless Coalition is charged with operationalizing what they want to do and helping our partners understand their role in that. Providers are all entities that their mission is around homelessness, and that our partners are systems that we need to help function, but their primary goal is not homelessness. So for example, with healthcare, we need JPS to help our system function. However, obviously their mission is healthcare. Homelessness is a small part of what they do. We do all have a shared community vision. We came up with this when we were restructured back in 2019, and that's to create a vibrant community where everyone has a place to call home. The COC aims to create partnerships and impact effective and efficient community solutions. So this will give you an idea of Fort Worth leadership. I mentioned that Leah King is the chair, Mary Margaret is the vice chair, Steve is the past chair. So got some heavy hitters there, they've been great. Help guide me in the things that I do. The board of directors, the COC board of directors, there is a leadership council that meets twice a year. There are permanent seats on that leadership council. So Mayor Parker, Fort Worth mayor, has a permanent seat on that council along with the mayor of Arlington, the chair of the mayor's council, Tarrant County judge, and Parker County judge. Membership council is made up of 28 community representatives. This will give you an idea. Leadership council actually appoints quite a few of those. Membership council elects them as well, but wanted just you all to see kind of who related to Fort Worth. Even though Fort Worth does not appoint the entire board, I will say Fort Worth has a pretty significant influence on who is on the board. Tara actually serves in, the city does have a permanent position on membership council as well. Tara serves in that position. Mary Margaret has a permanent position. The CEO of Housing Solutions has a permanent position on there. Leadership appoints a nonprofit CEO. Currently that is Heather Dixon. Toby Owen did hold that position for 6 years. He is now termed out, but still very active. And so you can see who those are. Whitney Boyd is the neighborhood representative, represented by leadership council, appointed by leadership council as well. So this gives you an idea of who serves. And like I said, even though Fort Worth does not appoint the whole board, heavy influence from the city. These are the 5 pillars of our strategic plan. We are in year 5 of 6 of a strategic plan. I think it's worked pretty well for us, but in short, that's to build an effective and efficient housing crisis system, to understand the scope and need through data analysis, so to be data-driven, to ensure adequate affordable housing stock and access, to be housing-focused, to have an engaged community, so to increase community knowledge and response, and then to be resource-driven. So we want to maximize our resources to increase the commitment there. We do that through being performance-driven, putting a lot of continuous quality improvement in place. So homeless in Fort Worth, just to give you an idea of who is it. And I do want y'all to know, you're asking a lot of data questions, which is great. If you have questions, you are more than welcome to send those to me at any point in time, not just during the State of the Homeless or this workshop. One of the things the Homeless Coalition does is that we own and manage all the data that is entered into a central database by homeless service providers. And so we are constantly kind of slicing and dicing data. So the majority of the population who's homeless in Fort Worth is homeless for less than 6 months. That is a stark contrast to what you probably hear from constituents, but the majority are homeless for less than 6 months. 60% of people are either employed and or willing to work and able to work. 40% have a disability that does not allow full-time work. Each night, this is from 2023, as Fernando mentioned, Point-in-time count numbers are still very preliminary. This is about 6 weeks before, ahead of time when they normally get released. So this is from 2023. I don't anticipate them being too different. But each night around 2,100 people are homeless in the city of Fort Worth, about 1,200 people in shelter, 900 people outside. And the top reasons for becoming homeless, actually, that people have reported to us for over a decade is the inability to pay rent and the lack of employment to give them the wages to pay rent. Disability is number 3 on that list, but those are the top 2 reasons that have been reported for years. This gives you an idea of current trends. Many of you I've met with, and we've talked about this, that homelessness increased significantly. We are seeing it go down a little bit now at this point, I think for various reasons, but increased really, we saw a spike there after all that assistance ended. Also, this is on our website, so if you all want to look at homeless information, we have dashboards on our website available for the public to look at. So this gives you an idea of where we are. So one thing the Homeless Coalition does is we do modeling around our system. So what does our system look like? Who's in our system? What interventions do they need? That sort of thing. So to give you an idea, in the span of 12 months, this is about what our system looks like. So in the span of 12 months, 6,545 households will become homeless. So they will become homeless. 935 will figure it out. So that means they'll touch our system and then they'll go. We will never see them. We see them for 2 weeks and then they're gone. We do not view that as a bad thing. We view that as great. People figure it out. So that leaves 5,610 households who need assistance. We currently have enough money to serve 2,246 of those households. So right now that leaves 3,364 we do not have an intervention for. So we do not have the money or resources to serve this group. I said we were resource driven and we want to maximize our resources. And so this gives you an idea of what our resources are over 12 months as well. So when we were looking at that, how people flow through our system, this is the estimated. I have gotten the question from you all a lot about how much does it cost to address homelessness. The total cost is about $90 million a year. To be clear, I do not need $90 million a year. We do not need that. We have an investment of about 26 at this point. These investments are broken down based on what intervention people need. As I mentioned before, we are very committed to not everyone needs. We don't have 3,000 households that need permanent supportive housing. People need a variety of different interventions, and we are very committed to providing them with the intervention they need and letting them get back on their way. So right now we have a gap of about $64 million. I will say, in some good news, this does not include the Bezos Foundation money, so that's $2.5 million. And then we were notified a couple weeks ago that our federal funds that we manage, we asked for $18 million and got 20, so that's an additional 2, so that's good. I will say that 20, some of that does go to rental increases, has recognized that rent has gone up and has not necessarily kept pace. So that's an additional 4.5 that comes into here, but you have to model some way. But so this gives you an idea of what the gaps are, how many households we estimate need which intervention, and how that's broken down. You all also asked about housing funding sources. How does federal, state, and city break down? Federal resources are probably 90% of what's in our system for housing. As I mentioned, we get $20 million a year from HUD for funding, and those are all for housing. So the city actually gets, through ESG, gets the safety net money, I would call it, and the continuum of care gets housing money. The state does do a little bit of rapid rehousing, a tiny bit of permanent supportive housing, and then you also have the city's investment here with rapid exit, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing. So, mine are pretty fast. So some key takeaways that you've heard from others. I'm happy to answer questions, and I know we have partners too, and it's 1 o'clock, so I'm just trying to be respectful of y'all's time. I will say we have a high-performing system. So our system being jumbled and messed up and people not knowing what they're doing is not the case. We have a very high-performing system. Our partners are absolutely committed to, if we come to them and say, hey, here's a trend we've noticed, are y'all willing to try something? Usually they're like, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. If it works, expand it. If it doesn't, try to figure out why it's not working and fix that. One thing I was going to clarify is, we talked about the high impact pilot being a 17-month get the data we need to look at that. Just to clarify, we'll be looking at that before 17 months. We will generally look at that on a quarterly basis. So we don't wait to look at our programs. We measure all the time to see what's working. Our community plan has been successful in achieving goals. It's really given us a shared vision, a shared mission. We're moving in the same direction. And I will say, giving credit, huge credit to our partners, we have really moved from a shelter-focused system to a housing-focused system, in that shelter, although we need shelter, I think we always need shelter. Our shelters do an amazing job at what they do. That ultimately does not solve someone's homelessness. And so really you can see them moving into different types of housing, housing programs, owning housing, that sort of thing. But to scale response to need, I often say that this is not a we can do more with less situation. Unfortunately, with rising rents and that sort of thing, we actually need more to do more. So part of that is improved partnership with the county. If we're looking at the Houston model specifically, and others around the country, looking at that city-county partnership, we often say with Fort Worth, is it the chicken or the egg? So sometimes the rest of the county wants to say, oh, this is Fort Worth's problem. In reality, if you're homeless in North Richland Hills, you're going to either come to Fort Worth or Arlington. So we say it's a chicken or the egg, and I think that should be considered. We do have to increase financial investments in rental assistance, housing services, and also physical units. So it's not necessarily an either or. I wish I could tell you all it was an either or, but physical units have to come alongside with rental and housing services in both homeless set-asides and also affordable housing as well. Okay, I blew through that. What questions do you all have for me, or do you all have questions for me?
Thanks, Lauren. Just one question. Did you do modeling for 5-year future homelessness trends, projecting out that far?
So I did modeling through 27.
Okay.
I believe is, how do I get to slides that are not in the presentation, but we have available? Oh, click all the way through. Okay. Yes, I will. Let's see. Sorry, bear with me here for just a second. A little preview of what everybody else is talking about. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So yes, so one of the things that we do, which actually is something, this needs to be fixed, but one of the things that we do is look at, okay, if we know how much money we have, here is how many households we know we can serve. So I don't know if this has a pointer on it. Okay, so if $0 more are invested, and this is the assumption that if inflow is the same as 2023, so assuming no increase happens, inflow stays the same of what it is, we know that we can serve 2,246 households in the city of Fort Worth. So this is specific to the city of Fort Worth. I do also have it for the county. The gray, it says no housing option, I'm sorry, my mistake. This got taken out and did not get fixed. And so if we can serve 2,246, that means that we'll have 4,858 who will not have an intervention. And so you can just see, like, as you have a higher leftover portion that does not have an intervention, the population grows. So whereas this year in the city of Fort Worth, or in the past 12 months, we've had about 6,500 households who experience homelessness. In 2027, my model here is that we'll have about 10,000. So you can see how it, I don't want to say spirals, but these numbers concern me quite a bit. So that's if no inflow changes. If homelessness increases, as in more people are starting to experience homelessness, this would be with a 10% increase, and that's just a guess, like I said, a model. We would go from about 6,500 households experiencing homelessness to about 12,000.
It's very eye-opening. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Lauren, council? Yeah, Michael?
Hey, Lauren, thanks for putting this together and all the work that you are doing. I kind of looked through the rest of the presentation, and I don't want to get buried because when we get rushed at the end. But do you have any real policy suggestions for us as a council?
Yes, we have a couple of policy suggestions. Around housing, I guess I can say we have also, so the Homeless Coalition collaborates and coordinates with homeless service providers. As we have started to be more housing focused, we have expanded that to partner with housing developers. And so kind of the thought was we got capital to build, and then now how do we make it easier for affordable housing developers to build? And so that is anyone from Toby, who's creating PSH and owning PSH, to Habitat, who's creating homeownership. Our thought is the more elasticity you can create in the market, then that's good for everyone. And so some policy suggestions that we have are to, and Tara mentioned them briefly, but to expedite the process for permanent supportive housing and for projects who have majority affordable units. So any development that has 51% or more of affordable units, expedite those developments. Additionally, waive all fees that can be waived by statute. Right now, it's kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation where the city's investing $10 million in a development and then they're paying, partners are paying $1 million or $2 million back to the city in fees. Some of those cannot be waived. Do absolutely recognize that, but if we could figure out how to help offset that cost, I think that would be really helpful. And then I will say in the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan, including housing in the bond is suggested. So to build the number of units we need, and it's not, we'll never be able to build ourselves out of it. Mary Margaret and I have this conversation all the time. It goes into building economic development, workforce readiness, all the things wrap into that, but we do need to build some. And so bonds have been shown to bring in additional outside investment. Atlanta did $100 million, and then they got it matched with $100 million from foundations. Not necessarily that would happen here, but I don't know how to raise the capital, public capital otherwise. So that's a policy suggestion that we would have. And then otherwise, it would be to just prioritize funding for homelessness and looking at how we do this and how we model things, looking at what are the different options to do it and how do we do it.
Any other questions for Lauren? Yep, Alan, then Chris.
Lauren, excuse me. Thank you for the presentation today. I would ask if you could help reconcile a couple of numbers for our listening audience.
Sure.
And we look at this slide and we say there's about 5,200 people next year that will have no housing option, but we go back to slide 39 and we say we have 1,200 living in shelter and then 900 that are homeless or living outside. What's the delta between that 900 and the 5,000?
Great question. So the 900 is the census number. So on a given night, if you looked at one night a year, this is what's happening. The 5,600 number is annually, so across the 12 months of the year. So that's the difference in those two numbers. And that's hard. I've actually had, interestingly, a researcher asked me what the connection was between our annual number versus our point in time number. I don't know that anybody has a great answer for that because we've started to kind of talk about that and try to figure that out. But that's the difference between those. One is looking at, like, if you looked at homelessness on a given day in Fort Worth versus if you look at homelessness over the year.
Thank you.
Chris, and then Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question Michael just asked you. I asked the question in our work session, I'm not sure if you can hear me, I asked the question in our work session last time about the bonds. And so we know that we're quite different from Austin and Houston when it comes to bonds or just the way we run our city. Two-part question, I don't know if you can answer it today, because I asked for like an IR on it. And so as it relates to the bonds, if we was to try to go their route to put housing in our bonds, because a couple of people have asked me this, that does housing. Knowing forward, what would be reasonable to ask our voters to go to the polls for a bond election for housing? Secondly, we don't want to do something just to say we're doing something. What would we really need to put a dent into the housing market? I mean, I know it won't be 100 million, you know, but is it somewhere around? We're talking about 20 million, 40, 50, that makes sense for Fort Worth, and that we can say we did this number and we was able to provide X amount of housing over 5 years because of that.
So I agree with you on the Texas cities. I think we're looking at Texas cities just because then you grab the state law, right? So they've clearly, but I also have kind of sister cities that we compare to on the COC level that we look at that we're also looking for bonds. So for example, Charlotte, I think Charlotte's a great example. Their county size is about the same, their city size is about the same. Also looking at Denver, Kansas City, Columbus, Ohio, and I'm missing somebody. So we're pulling information from there to say, like, Atlanta, to say what have they done and what were the results of that. And even, I will say, talking with foundations, private foundations, they actually really liked when we put together the PSH and family housing to say, you know, there's this much public investment, foundations want to come in and support this. So I think there's a lot to be said about if you do a bond, then how much private funding can be brought in because of that. You're just not only relying on the bond money, you're generating a lot of other funding because of that. So how do you leverage those funds? And then your first question was, or I don't know if I answered your question. I know we have been working on it and looking at it as a housing group to say, what would this look like? What would it produce? How do you do that? As far as the amount of money that needs to be put in, one of my big things is I don't know that it can't just be a financial investment. I think there are a lot of tools that communities across the US use to create affordable housing. We can't just say, how much is this going to cost and can we write a check for it? And there's not a silver bullet either. That's the thing. So how do we look at all the different things that are available from land bank, land trust, different policies that expedite affordable housing, whatever it might be, there are lots of different ways. You know, when you look at policy, it's like time is money. And so if we can save our developers time, then great, we've saved them money too, right? And so I don't think there's necessarily one amount to say, if we wrote a check for X, we would do this. I think it's more all the tools in conjunction with each other to figure out how to make things run like that.
Right, and that's fine. I don't know if that was the first question either, but it was just, I'm putting it out in the atmosphere.
Oh, okay.
Secondly, if we move with the bond process, do you think that we can talk to private donors leading up to that we can have an understanding if they'll match those dollars? And if we moved away from the bond process and said we're just going to invest somehow through the city in some mechanism form, would those same private investors come and match those dollars?
I think so. I think it's a conversation. I mean, I think the city and private entities like public-private, and so how do you make that work? So I think that, honestly, I feel like people are up for discussion on what works, what we make work, how do we make something work, that kind of thing. So, yes.
It's in the atmosphere. Thank you.
Hello there, and
Hi.
thank y'all for the presentation today. I've been looking forward to this. Couple questions come to mind. The first one is the rapid exit and rapid rehousing. Can you talk a little bit more about that in context of these projections and how many of these households could potentially be positively benefit from that type of program? And then are there any opportunities to make investments that help expand the capacity of those?
Yeah.
And I have a follow-up after that.
Okay, sorry guys, I'm gonna take you through the slides real quick so we can go back to this table. There we go. So over here in the needed section, this will give you an idea, well, the total gives you an idea for rapid exit. We estimate that 755 households need that intervention. That is based on the assessment that we do. And so there is a gap there. I will say we're closing that a little bit with Bezos. So like I said, those numbers are not in there. Also able to close this diversion gap with Bezos as well. So when we're looking at where to invest and what to do, my hope is that it's never just dump it all in X, because one size doesn't fit all. But are there opportunities for investment? The majority of rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing money does come from the federal government. So are there opportunities to invest there? Absolutely. Rapid rehousing works very, very well for families, especially, and for people who just need a little bit longer to get back on their feet. So I don't know. Do you have a specific question about,
Yeah, what does it look like? I mean, I understand the dollar amounts, but what is that? I
like
know
what's-
context.
what's the difference?
What's the for instance, with Rapid Rehousing, 28 million, what does that look like if we were to match that investment?
Okay, so so Rapid Rehousing looks like rental assistance plus services for 6 to 18 months. Generally, our average time in Rapid Rehousing is about 10 months. And the difference between Rapid Rehousing and permanent supportive housing is that Rapid Rehousing turns over on an annual basis. So we assume every year we're gonna have 330 households that can be served by this. Even if we don't get more, we know they're gonna turn over, and so we're gonna continue to have that churn and serve them. So that's what that looks like. Rapid Rehousing is actually all in scattered sites, so they're in apartments all over the city, based on where they want to live. So that's what that looks like, and it would look like if the city invested in that, my assumption would be, it would look like investing in neighborhood services. An RFP goes out to partners. We already have a number of very qualified partners that do this, and so then that would be awarded based on that. We have outcomes that we measure with those and that sort of thing. Rapid exit, the difference there is that with Rapid Exit, it is a very, very light touch. These are, we developed Rapid Exit, as Tara mentioned, because we found we had people who were staying in shelter that were working and were saving up to get back into housing. Because once you lose your housing, I mean, it's gonna cost thousands of dollars to get back in. And so if you're making even $15 an hour, it's gonna take you a long time to save up for that deposit, first month's rent, all of that. And so we figured out if we could take care of that and they can sustain, so that's a huge part of that piece, is that we're not gonna put them in an apartment if they can't sustain that. Then they're on their way and off and going again. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's very
Okay.
helpful. And then the follow-up question kind of dovetails off of this. I would love your reaction on if there's any cities doing this. I just briefly stepped back to talk to Victor and DJ, and maybe Melinda can chime in on this too, but are there any cities that are currently putting ordinances in place that require a set aside for all multifamily development, say 3%, 5%, 10%, that is baked into kind of market rate, high density deals? We may not be able to answer that today, but it's something that I might be curious in, because, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever have enough public dollars to invest, but if there's a way to, through policy, to leverage wider impact and also to ensure affordability of units is everywhere, right? I've been thinking a lot about that. So have you seen anyone doing that?
So kind of the, I guess, overarching thing I'd say is most cities that we've looked at have some kind of umbrella affordable housing effort or policy, and kind of all the things fallen under that, whether it be a set aside, whether it be fee waivers, whether it be whatever, so that if it's affordable housing, it's moving forward. So yes, I think it looks different in different places, but yes, generally.
Awesome. I'd be interested, and we'll keep working on this offline, but I'd be interested in maybe exploring the possibility of incentivizing or creating some type of ordinance to create set-asides across the city so that we're spreading out affordability in all of our high-density developments.
Yeah. Thank you, Jared. Any other questions for Lauren? Elizabeth?
Hey, Lauren, thank you so much. So I'm, sorry, I'm looking at this graphic, and it says total investment needed is roughly $90 million. And then you said, but I don't need $90 million, right? But you're telling us that it's going to take $90 million to get it done. And so that gap is $63 million. And I think some of my colleagues have already kind of pushed for different ways that we might be able to achieve that gap. But what I would be interested in is how much of that, in comparator cities, how much of that type of funding does it come from federal, county, state, county, city, or is it private entities, so that I can have a better understanding of where maybe we're not quite on par, or where we're better than other communities, and where we maybe need to push on some of our leverage, some of our partners in the community from the private aspect as well. And so I don't expect you to have it today, but.
Well, I was going to touch on, I can't remember who asked about populate. We were talking about CDBG.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we advocate for at the national level, is because even for Mary Margaret, she's functioning with a number of vouchers that is much, much lower than our population. And so advocating at the national level to say, can we re-level these resources? Because we're still working on formulas from early 2000s or whatever, and our population has grown exponentially. And so how do we get those federal and state resources to say like, hey, we're one of the fastest growing cities in the US, like we need some additional investment. So
Do organizations like that have indicators that help them, like predictive indicators that help them predict a rise in homelessness? Is there any proactiveness in their formulas, or is it all reactive? Because I heard Victor kind of go through some high level what they use.
I would generally say it's reactive.
Okay.
I mean, because we need the Fed's investment, but it's a federal formula that it will probably literally take an act of Congress to change it.
Okay. Well,
So-
we can do hard things.
Agreed.
And I know Tara recommended the book, and I think several of us at the table have read it, but the homelessness isn't a housing problem, and there were some slides on there as well. But the one thing that really struck me in it was that the biggest predictor wasn't mental health or anything like that. It was the fluidity of your rent rates and what that looked like relative to the population and the available of units.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, and when you looked at the cities that were performing, it was because as they grew, as they brought in new jobs, they made sure they had housing for that. And so I think that's a policy thing that we can work on at the city. But if you use that type of model, there are predictive indicators we can look at and kind of gauge where we think we might go.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do? How do we use that? And then what do we do with that information as we move forward?
So I think that we can use predictive models. I think it does exactly what it says, right? Where are we going and how many more housing units? So we're 32,000 behind at the moment. So how do we start to dig out of that and also prepare for the future? So as a city, where are we going? If we're bringing in corporations, that sort of thing. I know part of it too is, like you said, if a business says, we're gonna bring 1,000 jobs here, that's great. But where are those 1,000 people gonna live? So really looking at, in our economic development plan, do we have a plan to bring X number of headquarters here? If so, then what is our plan to also put housing close to it? So I don't know that I've answered your question,
no,
but
I think somewhat.
yes, I think you can use this to do some planning and really look forward to say, in 10 years where we want to be.
But so you've told us the federal government definitely doesn't do that. Do we do that here at the county? Like, do you use these type of methods, or is it more based on the homeless count?
So actually the predictive that I used is based on our annual number. We have a lot of really, really good data, and knowing kind of who the population is and that sort of thing. I think that we're starting to do that, I guess I'd say. I think we've gotten better and better and better with our data to be secure in saying, here's where I think we're going. So I think we're starting to do that. It's starting to gain traction with other housing providers to say, okay, what can you all do? Like that sort of thing. So.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, so I think the quote that I highlighted and made sure I tagged because it was the most impactful to me in this book is, homes are where jobs go at night. And so I'd be interested to know what other communities do in regards to tying economic development, particularly incentives for with housing, so that we have places for those jobs to go at night.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Lauren? No?
One more.
Oh, sorry, Jared, go ahead.
Back to the set-aside conversation, you sparked a thought. Can we also do set-aside for like folks experiencing homelessness in certain market rate units?
Yes, and we do that. Actually, some of the PSH projects or developments that you all saw that are in the ARPA pipeline, some of those are in, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head if all of those are affordable or some are market rate. I know some of them. But we do that now. So as properties come online, we can also do set-asides there. And I will say there, again, this is like a both and situation where, we're 32,000 units short. People experiencing homelessness wouldn't be housed until we're until we're building our last 1,000, right? So we built 31,000. All these people are much better, not much better tenants, but don't have any barriers to rental, right? So they can just pay. And so, you know, having those homeless set-asides is pretty important because it allows us to overcome different barriers that are put in place.
Any other questions, council? Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it. We're going to move to our community partner perspectives, and we're going to speed date. Steve Montgomery is up first, who is president and CEO of Fort Chamber of Commerce. And then next up is Mary Margaret Lemons with Fourth Housing Solutions. Hi, Steve.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Mayor Parker and council members. I will be painfully brief. Steve Montgomery with the Fort Worth Chamber. As Lauren said, I was also past chairman of the Continuum of Care Board appointed by Mayor Betsy Price. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you today to talk about this critical community concern. Homelessness is an issue that chambers of commerce are more and more becoming involved in. Because there is a direct nexus between homelessness and our mission of economic development, business expansion and retention, and quality of life. Homelessness impacts business, very simply. We routinely survey our members to learn about the various challenges that they face in conducting their businesses and obstacles to their success. And for many of our members, particularly smaller retailers, restaurants, and related service providers, homelessness in our community negatively impacts their ability to conduct commerce, with camping and loitering identified as problems impeding their business operations. And some actually identify this as their number one issue. We strive to serve our business members by providing information about how to respond, what to do, and who to call. We also serve our members through engagement with policymakers such as yourself. We seek to bring the voice of the business community to the table in a positive and constructive manner to help their community find solutions. The Chamber does applaud the city's leadership for your efforts and significant investments addressing this issue through a housing-first approach and related strategies. We have a good community plan. We need to follow it, we need to stick to it, and we need to fund it. We're proud to work with our community partners in the room, including Lauren, her team at TCHC, as well as the service providers. And finally, we recognize that the challenge is not just for those of you around this table to solve. We all have a stake in this, and we all have a responsibility to engage. Fort Worth Chamber stands ready to be a reliable and contributing partner to the city and to be part of the solution. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Any questions for Steve? Just curious, I know that you're new in your role, but the survey that you did for members, that had to be well received and something they probably hadn't had an opportunity in a while to give a response to. Have you had any other follow-up from members, or maybe importantly, what could be helpful as a follow-up from this body to your members, since this was a predominant concern that they had?
We're going to conduct it. We're going to do the survey again, but we've activated a homeless committee, task force within the chamber of our members that are impacted by it and those who are concerned about the issue, to try to glean their wisdom and figure out how we can make policy recommendations to y'all, how it impacts business, and how we might work together on that. So, yes.
That'd be great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Okay, Mary Margaret Lemons is up next, and Susan Garnett will follow her with MHMR.
Mayor and council, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I have one big slide, I think. There we go. And I had three things written down on my note card to talk to you guys about, and then I started writing notes, so bear with me if I get off track. One, I just really want to tell you how collaborative we are here in Fort Worth compared to other cities, housing authorities and cities, municipalities. I have the opportunity to sit on a few national boards and travel across the nation, and when I go and see my counterparts, most of them, when they say COC, they also say maybe some other four-letter words, or there's a lot of or eye rolling. They don't get along, they don't work well together, and it's really not their first priority. A lot of housing authorities aren't seeing homelessness as a problem that they're addressing. And so I was able to step into a housing authority that had a long-standing relationship with our COC and continue that. And I really value being a part of the partnership and working so closely, not only with the city TCHC, but all the service partners that are here today. And because of that, we're able to do big things and kind of scary things, but we do them together, and it's because we trust each other. And so I know that Victor's not going to leave me holding the bag, that I can call on Lauren and ask for help if I need it. I mean, really, we work together to solve problems that other cities wouldn't even approach. If I tell somebody that Casa de Esperanza closed in 90 days and City Legal had docs back to me in 30, like that's unknown. And so, I mean, that just doesn't happen. And I can't impress upon you how important the relationships throughout this process are. And so we believe at Fourth Housing Solutions that we are a part of that. So you can see here our investment. If you add them all together, it's about, let's just call it 1,400 ways that we prioritize homelessness, using vouchers, set-asides, preferences, and then hard units as well. And so we have continuously grown our investment in the homelessness community, whether it be through mixed income units that we set aside. Cowan Place just opened in November. It's gorgeous. It has PSH units in it. And then we have single site projects, both Casa de Esperanza and Casa de los Sueños coming online. And then we also provide project-based vouchers to projects that we don't own. And so Quail Trail, Palm Tree, and some of the other projects that you have heard about in our community are operational because of the place-based assistance that we provide there. And typically, if you have rental assistance, like a project-based voucher, it is enough to cover the rental assistance and some services. And so it really can provide more than just the rent. It can pay for some of the services like DRC and MHMR and other people provide.
Mary Margaret, what's the average annual monthly value of one of those vouchers?
Ours, it keeps increasing because rent keeps going up. And so it's $947, I believe.
Okay.
If I'm just going off the top of my head, but I can confirm that.
Okay.
So
And that's supposed to also provide services within that amount of money, or that's just for rent?
Right, so
Okay.
places like Palm Tree, so what we figured out, right, the unicorn is no debt on the property.
Yeah.
And so the rent is just covering the operational expense. So
Okay.
Casa de Esperanza and Palm Tree are two good examples of how when you are able to provide the capital to pay for the property up front and not have debt service, then that voucher can pay for the services plus the operational cost.
Okay, thank you.
So collaboration, we're a part of the solution. And then I'm going to get to some of the not so great news, right? Voucher acceptance is a real problem. In 2018, HUD did a study. They studied, I think, 5 major cities across the US. Fort Worth did not show well in that study. We had 78% voucher denial rate. That's not your fault. That's not my fault. That's the private landlords that are saying no to a voucher. And to be honest, it's not really their fault, right? They're running a business. And if you have an option of accepting rent from an individual on a monthly basis, or submitting yourself to becoming a vendor of a quasi-governmental entity, an inspection, part of my rent comes from the tenant, part of it comes from that quasi-governmental entity, right? It's a harder process. And so a lot of times they're gonna go the easy way and say, I'm gonna take it from, John Smith. And John Smith probably also has a pretty good rental history compared to someone that may have had issues and needs housing assistance. And so our folks usually have some barriers, and some of it's their background, some of it's their both rental background and criminal background. And if you have to choose between two people, that's the business decision people are making.
And vacancy rate's also very low in Fort
So we
Worth.
live in a hot market. You guys
Yeah.
made Fort Worth a great place to be, and everybody's figured that out, and they're moving here. So that's also another good point, is it's a cyclical issue, right? When we're having problems with the economy, our vouchers get really popular. When regular people can't pay rent, vouchers are the number one things. Everybody will take them. But when they don't need it, right, they're gonna not be a part of the solution. So we've talked about what works, the units being set aside, the rental assistance, and the services. And so when you're able to combine all 3 of those things into a project at the same time, we've seen really good success. We also saw success during the pandemic with some emergency housing vouchers. So our community was able to we got 133, the county got some, Arlington got some. But HUD gave us extra money per voucher for things like landlord bonuses. We could hold units and pay them for them while people were getting there, so they didn't lease it to someone else. We could pay deposits. Had more money to be creative with to get people into housing quicker, and it worked. We leased all 133 up, and then Lauren was able to ask for, I can't see you, Lauren. Lauren was able to ask for more from the state, and we had more resources coming in. And so I think HUD's learned those lessons, and they're taking into account some of those waivers that they made available during that time and making some of those things more permanent. But one of the slides they had in here was like, should we ask them to help us ask for more money? And right now, I can't use more money because people won't accept the vouchers. And so I hate to ask for more if we can't be good stewards of it, and that's where we are. Lauren was correct. They did a fair share allocation in 1996. Our voucher authority per how many I could issue was about 5,000. It's increased. If you add all the different types of vouchers and programs we administer, I have about 6,500 vouchers for the city of Fort Worth.
I want to make sure I hear this right. So the first time, or 1996, they did a reallocation, we got 5,000?
So we got 5,000 total. So it's not 5,000 additional, just we were at 5,000.
Okay. And so how many years is that?
1996 to now?
Yeah.
Almost, what is that?
24, 28?
Yeah, I'm not math. I'm a lawyer.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
do
way
math.
too pretty for that. Listen, so in 26 years, we've
So we've gotten, we've gotten a fair share allocation. I think we got about 50 new vouchers.
50.
Since 1996.
So we've gotten 50.
That are not special allocation, that are just general HCV, housing choice vouchers for anybody.
In 28 years.
Yeah, because I was shocked. I was baffled at how a city of almost 1 million people could only have 5,000 vouchers.
And that's the case across the country? Those allocations have not changed since 1996?
So that we just, in the last 2 years, have gotten, I think, 37-ish, or I can go back and check the numbers.
Yeah.
It was under 50, and then they gave me like a couple more. It was actually harder to do the paperwork for the 2 that they gave me versus, the time it took to do that versus the
But
rental
you're saying,
assistance.
from an advocacy perspective, asking for them right now would actually not really be helpful because we don't have the units.
Because they're going to look at my utilization from last year and say, well, you only spent like 90% of your budget. And that's not because it wasn't on the street trying to. It was people getting denied going and looking for units.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So while I have your attention, if you go to my new office, you're going to see a quote, and it's not for me. It's from a guy that's smart down in Austin. He's me in Austin. All types of housing for all types of people in all parts of town. So if you look at our map, if you look at what we do, we started deconcentration almost 30 years ago, and we're going to continue doing that. And we don't believe that there's a single type of housing or style. So when we're talking about PSH, we talked about scattered site, we talk about single site. We know that there's not one answer that's going to fit everybody's needs, so we have to be creative and not just be stuck into a model or a box. And then I do want to tell you that between our housing authorities, Wayne at the county, Mindy at Arlington, we try to work with our continuum. We came up with one common application to ensure that we're not putting our service providers and our clients through hell to try to get housing, because it's not an easy process. And so we're willing to be collaborative and figure out best case for all of us and give a little bit for the greater good. And then National Coalition of help me, Lauren. Okay, so the National Low Income Housing Coalition, there it is, does a study every year. They do a gap report, they do an out of reach report. They come up with a housing wage. And for Tarrant County right now, to afford an efficiency apartment with no subsidy in Tarrant County, you need to earn $21.17 an hour. So if you're paying anybody less than $21.17 an hour, you're adding to my affordable housing problem.
You're going to get Jared all upset, so just put a pin in it. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna fix that, Jared.
So as a housing authority, I don't pay anybody less than that. Does that mean I have to combine positions and sometimes not hire as many people as I want? Yes, but I refuse to add to the affordable housing problem for our city.
Yeah.
And then I will tell you that we are, as a housing authority, looking at our capacity to issue bonds, not just for tax credit projects, but general obligation bonds, so we can have some more capital to invest. Denver's done this well. In 2019, they issued $130 million that gave them $120 million in proceeds. They did it in combination with the city and the county. They split it in half. $62.5 million went to affordable housing projects. The other half went to permanent supportive housing. And so we have models that have worked, and El Paso has just issued general obligation bonds here in Texas, so we know it can be done. So we're looking at all ways that we can increase our capacity to help with the issues.
think Gina has a question. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a real acknowledgement. Mary Margaret serves as vice chair for the Board of Directors for North Texas Lead. And when you made the presentation and stated how you pay your people, that has resonated with a number of the other CEOs because for whatever reason, it sticks. And when you know what's fair to pay someone, if you're a good person, you try to make that happen everywhere you go. And so I just wanted to acknowledge you for that. I know you've got a ribbon cutter to get to. Tell them hi for me. But just thank you for the work that you do and the passion that you give this job. I tell people all the time, Mary Margaret had no intention of ever becoming the CEO. She was this attorney sitting somewhere in an office making things work. And the opening came about and she was the perfect person for it. And this entire area loves you for your dedication, your commitment, and your passion. And I just say thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
I think, Alan, what time is your ribbon cutting? Let me ask that
It's
question.
at 2:30 and stop 6. We sold a lot to an affordable housing developer
Yes.
who built a house on it, and a Cavill resident used their voucher to buy it.
Awesome.
I mean,
What a cool story.
I know.
We're going to get you out on time, I
Okay.
promise. Okay, Alan and then Elizabeth.
So, thank you, Mayor, and Mary Margaret, thank you for the great presentation. I really appreciate this information. One of the things that was a little bit surprising to me was that we were having a hard time finding places that would accept vouchers, and we were not able to give all that we could. And this is especially troubling to me is because over the past year, we've become aware that Dallas has put nearly 700 vouchers into Fort Worth and Tarrant County, which is taking away from your available inventory. Do we have the ability to look outside of Tarrant County as well?
So we have an interlocal with Tarrant County, which allows us to lease in the county. My jurisdiction is the city of Fort Worth. And so through that interlocal agreement, I'm able to lease outside that. Dallas is leasing over here under a lawsuit called the Walker case. It was, we can go into a different meeting. But because of that, they're actually paying 125% of the fair market rents, which is higher than we can pay. And so that is creating some competition amongst voucher holders and landlords because they would prefer a DHA voucher over Tarrant County or Fort Worth Housing because they pay more based on that lawsuit.
And our hands are tied right now, correct?
I mean, we could do something. It would probably be expensive and very time consuming.
Okay.
Because Dallas believes that they have the right to lease here. I think they have an incorrect legal opinion from that judge, but yeah.
That may be a Leanne question later, right? Yeah, okay. Elizabeth, thank you, Alan, for bringing that up.
So as I kind of think on the access to vouchers, and really, it's not that we don't need them, it's because we have a hard time finding people who will take them. Do you know if any other cities tie a provision in their economic development agreements with any sort of housing or any sort of development that
a housing choice voucher if we're going to be in the partnership? The city could do the same with anything they partner on.
Okay.
So the HFC could do that. I don't know about an ordinance. We'd have to research it to see if that would run afoul of the state rule.
Okay. Leanne, if you look into that, please, because I think being part of the solution and not the problem, if they're going to come to us and ask for economic incentives, whether that be through our TIFs or tax abatements, we need to make sure that they're overall helping the city of Fort Worth.
Any other questions for Mary Margaret? Great presentation.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you very much. Next up is Susan Garnett with MHMR, and Susan will be followed by Toby Owen with Presbyterian Night Shelter.
So where's the clicker? On this one? So I am Susan Garnett, and I am with MHMR, and I know that you've had a long afternoon or a long day, so we'll just talk a little bit about mental health here. And these are statistics about these are public health statistics about the number of people with mental health conditions in our community. And I'll just remind you that about half the people who have some mental health condition never reach out for services, right? There are conditions that are situational, that are temporary, that people don't need any significant services. And then others who need more comprehensive services, all the way up to people who have chronic illnesses. And what you see there is the relatively small interface of less than 20% usually of people who are homeless who have mental health conditions. Sometimes people are uncertain of who we are, so I just wanted to provide you guys with this so you'd have some sense of who we are. We're a unit of local government created by Tarrant County as a partnership to bring in state and federal funds to address the needs of people with mental health conditions, intellectual disabilities, other kinds of conditions that are touched by our services. Typically people who are Medicaid, low income, and uninsured. So we have a mix of federal, state, and local funds that support us. We have about a $214 million budget and about 2,000 employees. So we work a lot with the city of Fort Worth in a variety of ways, and these are some of the partnerships affiliated with homelessness that we thought it would be good for you to know that we're involved with. We certainly have been partners from the beginning with the Directions Home program. We have been very involved with permanent supportive housing. The HOPE team is something that we work closely with. We also have a team that reaches out in the community for homelessness. You may also know that we work with the code enforcement, we work with the police department, we work with, we are the 988 call taker for individuals who have mental health crises and want to reach out by phone or text to reach somebody for assistance. And then, of course, we provide housing. So one of the things that we're able to do, because we do bring state funds in, we are able to provide additional state funding to have projects like our Healthy Community Collaborative project that provides state funds matched by local funds to bring housing resources in, and additional kind of housing resources for special populations, individuals who might have come from state hospitals who are returning to the community, individuals who might have come from the prison system and returning to the community. So we have special pots of money for housing resources for those populations. And we continue to work really closely with Tara and Lauren as we sort through where there are opportunities for us to work together. I would just echo what Mary Margaret says, that in this community, I have a lot of opportunity to see other communities. We are really a community that focuses on how we work together collaboratively and how we problem solve. And I think that's what really holds us apart from other communities. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions specifically about mental health that I can answer, and otherwise I know that that time is ticking.
Any questions for Susan? No, I'd say thank you for being willing to partner. I know we've got more future policy discussions about the high impact pilot, but it wouldn't even be on the table if it weren't for you and your team. So thank you very much. We appreciate all you do.
We appreciate it. We've worked really closely with Tara, and think we can find a path for success for some folks. You know, it's not going to solve all of the problems, but it's going to solve some of the problems for some of the people, and that's a good thing for our community.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Next up is Toby Owen.
All right, thank you guys for allowing us to have this time. It's really important and very, very good. And I will skip to the next slide. That's me. This slide has already been reviewed a few times, but I wanted to make a couple of comments. One is that just to emphasize the point that the system really does work well together. And there is a lot of different organizations in each of these models that work together and have a role in those services. There really isn't a duplication of services because we each do something a little bit different. An example is street outreach. We have 2 employees that do street outreach, but they only do the East Lancaster around the shelter. DRC has a very good street outreach. They work with the HOPE team going throughout the city as well as into encampments and doing that sort of thing. So working together is a really key thing for the nonprofits. And that's really it to my slide, but I have like 30 more minutes, so I'm gonna go off script a second. So I just wanted to give you guys just some props for doing this meeting. I've been doing this for a little while, and this is the first time in my time that the City Council has all spent 3 hours doing this on this topic. I have seen a transition over the years within the City Council that it's not your problem or their problem, or let's get it out of our neighborhood, or let's put it in someone else's area. It really is a coming together, and how can we address this in a humane and effective manner rather than trying to ignore it and pushing it away. This council is coming together to do something about it, and that is really great. Some examples of that, number one is the Rapid Exits program. I have to give absolutely all of the credit to my coworker, Debbie Rabelais and Tara, on putting that together. That is truly one of the only programs in the nation that's doing that, and that's because Tara had the ability to think outside of the box and help people that need assistance on the short term. There's other examples of how we work well together. At the Presbyterian Night Shelter, we do three things: shelter, housing, and employment. Every type of advancement in new things that we want to do is going to be centered on employment and housing, not on shelter, because we can't shelter ourselves out of this. We have to have more housing. We have to put more people to work so they can afford housing. And it includes all housing. We spend a lot of time on permanent supportive housing, but it truly is all types of housing. We were lucky enough to do a family project last year where we're providing housing for families, 42 families. And we're also looking at another housing development this year to where we're going to provide housing for our Upspire program. And take it just for a moment. If someone working in Upspire, they don't meet the minimum that Mary Margaret wants, but it's $15 an hour, they're going to have to pay 30% of their income is $750. So we may look at that and think, wow, they can't do that. But I promise you can if you find the right housing development and you make it work with good partners. I do want to leave with one request that I think could make this, we can say we did something as we end this 3 hours. Money is a big deal. You all know it. You hear it from not only us, but everybody wants additional funds. During COVID, the city and the private community worked very, very well with Casa de Esperanza. They were able to take a motel, convert it into housing for 114 people within 90 days. That's remarkable. 2 years ago, we were awarded one of the projects here, 96 units. 2 years ago through the ARPA funding, private funding, city and county, for 96 units. That was 2 years ago. We still have not turned any dirt. Our project budget has gone up about $1.5 million because of the delay. And we're hoping that we can turn dirt within the next 3 months. And so I really, really would want to impress I know we can do it because we've done it before. We really need to come together with certain departments within the city to have a singular focus on how can we help affordable housing for those that are homeless. How can we make a path to make it either easier within the departments? Another example is we have to have 32 building permits for our 96 units. So how can we streamline some of these things that make it difficult?
I couldn't agree
Sorry
more.
to go off script.
No, I'm
but-
glad you did. I mean, I held a meeting just a few weeks ago with one of our developers that's using city funds, federal funds to build a project that was held up in one of the departments. So this is something that we have to have more help on. And whether it's a special program that we create that's just someone that is dedicated to these projects, it's got to change. It's pretty mind-numbing, and we apologize because I know that you're trying to build units for the right reasons. So we'll get to work on it.
Yeah, well, Macy, you've been, sorry.
It happens a lot. It's okay.
Mayor Parker, you've been very helpful in all of that.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Toby? Yes, Charlie.
Just one, and Toby, I'll make this quick. First, I think what you're doing is outstanding, so much so that it could be at a detriment in that one of the things I hear is, well, we need more housing and shelters down where all the people are at, in Lancaster. You hear that all the time. What would you say to those, I mean, as far as like spreading it across the city of Fort Worth, and taking what you have done and replicating that in other areas? Is that going to be possible? Would you be able to support that outside of just the area down here? And what would that look like? Or what would the needs be there for Presbyterian Night Shelter?
Well, our organization is going through a round of strategic planning, and I'm really hoping that our board will go all in on housing. I have a number in my head that I would like to propose that we strive over the next 10 years in housing. And it's going to take all types, honestly. It's going to take funding for new construction, whether that be permanent supportive housing, or it's going to take money for purchasing an apartment or a housing development, renovating that for Upspire, working people, or for families or veterans, on and on. So I think I really, if we can streamline the system internally to get us through the process, that's number one. And that's on the or that's on just everything. Primarily new construction is where you have to go through all of that work. If it's a renovation, where I think it would be very important, and I really fully believe this for this council and definitely with Mayor Parker, is giving us political support and letting us come to the table with the people in the neighborhoods that have difficulty with what we're doing, but helping us explain that and being a partner in how we can address any issues that may come up. So I think that is certainly an area that could be helpful. It has worked, and I think it's going to take all of us working together on new and renovations to make some big strides.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Toby, for being here. Okay, next I have Bruce Frankel with DRC Solutions, followed by Kim Robinson, Tarrant County Samaritan Housing.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate. I'd like to reinforce what Toby said. I've worked in a number of different communities in my career, going back to 1975. I've worked in San Francisco, I've worked in Oakland, I've worked in San Diego, and in Fort Worth. And by far, my best experience has been working here in Fort Worth, where people do collaborate, where we have done a lot of hard work in working together, trying to take the limited resources we have and applying them with as much leverage as possible to serve as many people. So the DRC, we've been around since 1999. We're a 501c3. We're one of the founding members of the COC, and we're registered with HUD as a PSH provider, permanent supported housing. The population that we focus in on now, and we've gone through a number of different evolutions. We started as a day shelter, what we focused in on now are those folks that are chronically homeless. This is a small percentage, about 20% of the total number of homeless. But these are the folks that you see out on the street that are decompensating, that are alarming, that cause a lot of the calls that PD gets and that you get from your constituents in the neighborhood. So what we've done, our role in the community is we do permanent supported housing, both site-based and scattered site. We adhere to a model called Pathways to Housing First, and it's a very specific model that addresses the complexities of housing homeless people that have been homeless for at least a year or 4 times within the last 3 years and have a significant disability that would probably preclude them from being able to hold full-time employment or engage in a lot of things that are more socially appropriate. We provide services in our PSH program to about 250 people, where we provide the case management and the support services. We also do critical documents. You cannot lease up an apartment, regardless of whether you're critically homeless or whether you're just situationally homeless. To get housing, people that are homeless need to sign a lease agreement just like you and I might. And if you don't have a Texas ID, you can't lease an apartment. You can't enter into a contract. So we provide critical documents that picture ID to about 2,100 people a year, and that involves collecting about 4,500 documents that are necessary for going and getting that ID. Birth certificate, social security, and a third sort of ID. We do outreach, and this is one of the big initiatives that we've worked with Lauren and Tarrant County Homeless Coalition on over the last several years. We do about 70% of the outreach in Tarrant County and that little sliver of Parker County that constitutes our COC. And we also have outreach workers that are assigned to the HOPE team and work with both Fort Worth PD and Fort Worth Fire in going out and engaging with people that are having a real difficult time on the street. We also do navigation. So once in the system, once people are referred for housing and they get all their documents in place, and they're ready to actually, and they've got a voucher, and they're ready to go out to get housing. People need help finding out where the housing is. So we have navigators that will help people go to different apartment complexes, help them in filling out applications, identifying where the resources are for them as well. So that's kind of what we do. We're really honored to be part of this continuum of care. Our agency is, it's not a large agency, but we're very nimble. And we really enjoy and are honored by the role that we play in being able to help solve problems quickly and efficiently. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. One question. I'm curious from your perspective on workforce and the individuals. This is hard work. What is your turnover rate? And is there anything that the city should be doing differently? Because you're a key partner in the work we're doing.
Right. So a couple of things. Our turnover rate's very low. Our tenure is very high, and that's one of the real indications of effectiveness of case managers, is being able to keep case managers for at least 4 or 5 years, so they can develop a network of resources and know the population well. So there's a couple of things that helps with that. An initiative where we can have some sort of a specific training or certification program, a pipeline from TCC or UTA or TCU with the social work program, so we could have a good flow of qualified case managers or case manager techs that would be able to step right in and do these jobs well. The jobs are very demanding. Over time, we're going to see the numbers go up. Caseloads of 1 to 24 are almost impossible. So the types of skills that case managers have will help them stay in their job longer. Another thing is being able to ensure that as we draw down the different sources of funding for support services, that there's enough to pay people a living wage. At one point, case managers were being paid starting about $32,000. So we had lots of case managers in our system who were at the poverty level, or if they had kids, they were below. And we've been able to up that. I think most of the agencies are starting salaries are between 40 and 45. But that's really starting to push it in our community in terms of being able to stay in those jobs a long time, make a living wage. So consideration of that is important. I think my colleagues and I will agree that we work really well together in supporting our case managers. TCHC does a really good job in having recognition opportunities for case managers and the hard work that they do.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other questions for Bruce, council?
All right,
No?
thank you.
Thank you very much. Kim Robinson, Samaritan House, followed by Artie Williams, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for this opportunity. For those of you who are not familiar with Samaritan House, I'm pretty sure most are. Samaritan House is over 30 years old, and we basically sit in the last 2 boxes. If you'll just go back one more. We sit in the last 2 boxes of this continuum of care. That's permanent supportive housing and permanent housing, but we also have affordable housing. Before I talk about affordable housing, I will say that for us, we think of permanent supportive housing as the base of that Maslow triangle that I think Tara mentioned earlier. So food, clothes, and shelter, that's the base of that triangle. Here we are providing that shelter piece. But then to get the sides of the triangle, that's where the supportive services come in. And that is what we do as well. So that in many cases could be helping you to understand how to budget your money, how to pay your bills, how to pay rent. What is rent? It could be how to get employment. It could be, well, if childcare is the problem or that's what's been inhibiting you, then let's get you childcare. and make sure that that is no longer an issue. Supportive services can be basic things like I just need food, or it could be more complex things that would keep you from being able to work. Our whole goal is that we're getting you on your feet and helping to one day get you on your own so that you are self-sufficient. All right. So Samaritan House started over 30 years ago as a place for people to come and spend their final days, to come and die with dignity. And that was people who had HIV or AIDS. And now today it has, in addition to that, expanded to any chronic illness or disability if we have the space for a person to come and be a permanent resident. That housing is theirs as long as they need or want it. So in terms though of affordable housing, we also have affordable housing. And it doesn't matter which type you look at, as you've heard today, you can never have enough. So between the two types that we have around 180 units that are available right there on Hemp Hill. There are 120 or so that people see and generally recognize, but there are another 60 units that are basically scattered sites that are also a part of Samaritan House. And in that 60 or so, there's affordable housing, and then you could find permanent supportive housing, but it's much, much less than what is concentrated there, right there on Hemp Hill. And I will say that our affordable housing is 60% of the area median income. So Mary Margaret, who was here earlier, manages the Housing Authority, and they give us sort of those formulas, and we accept vouchers. So we would accept more vouchers, but you can't accept it if you don't have a place to put a person. And that has been our problem. I was asked the other day, well, what is your wait list? And it's anywhere on any given day of 50 to 100 people. And they say, well, someone's been on there 2 years. What's going on? Well, our housing is permanent. So if there's not an opening, it means that people still want to stay there. So that's one of the reasons why you see me pushing for more units all the time. But in addition to vouchers, we have some people who are full pay. You know, they didn't get a voucher for whatever the reason might be, but they need housing, and fair market rent is quite more than our affordable housing. Remember, we're at 60% of area median income. So, you know, regardless, it takes a lot of meat to feed the beast is kind of where I have netted it. You've heard a lot of stories about how much it really takes. Someone told me one time, just a modest 1-bedroom apartment can mean 100 hours of work a week for a worker who's not making that $21 an hour. So imagine if you're at minimum wage, how many hours it would take you a week just to be able to afford a modest place to live. And this isn't unique to Fort Worth. It actually is not. It's a nationwide problem. I just happen to manage an agency, so I live and breathe this every day. So that is what I had to share with you today. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you very much, Kim. Questions, council? Thank you, Kim. We appreciate you being here and staying. Council, our next presenter is Artie Williams with U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Mayor and to the City Council, thank you so much for having me here today. As I was sitting there listening to everybody speak, I thought to myself that there are 2 words in the English language that should never be used together, and that's veteran and homelessness. For those of you who have been veterans, I would dare say that a lot of our comrades are out there and today have no place to call their home. And that's not okay. They served us, so we should serve them. We have and let me just say this, because I was supposed to say that first, is that I'm Artie William, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Comprehensive Homeless Center Programs for VA North Texas. And what that means is not only do we cover Fort Worth, but we cover Dallas, we cover down to Tyler, we cover up to Bonham and Sherman and McKinney and all of those areas over there, and even 2 counties in Oklahoma. But my basic focus is on Fort Worth, because this is my home. So I get told all the time, well, Fort Worth is not the only thing we do. Oh, yeah, it is. So services that we provide, and we just opened our new building that we had renovated at 101 New York Avenue. And it is now open, and we're going to be having an open house pretty soon to welcome everybody to come over to see what we've done. But the services that we provide there are outreach. We do have 2 people that go out and do outreach, and we work with some of the other outreach teams because we're only allowed to touch veterans. And you never know when that outreach team is going to touch veterans. So we kind of have to be out there for all of them. We do screenings for VA healthcare. Everybody that served in some capacity might or might not be eligible for healthcare, and so we have to screen for that. We provide transitional housing and work with MHMR and Presbyterian Night Shelter to provide transitional housing at the Liberty House and at Patriot House. We also provide permanent housing with our HUD-VASH program, and also we have Shelter Plus Care, but I want to focus more on the VASH program. That is the Housing and Urban Development VA Supportive Housing program. HUD provides the vouchers, and we provide the supportive services. So that means that we provide intensive case management based on acuity levels that the veteran may be at. So we have a way to screen for that. And some people come into housing and they only need to be seen once a month. And you just go by and make sure everything's okay. But then there are those others that suffer from drug addiction, that suffer from mental illness, that have PTSD is a big one, of course. We have to provide more intensive case management for them and may go see them every day. We also provide job placement services with our comprehensive work therapy program, and we get MOUs and get various employers in the community to work with our veterans. We also provide mental health groups and individual sessions, and also substance abuse groups and individual sessions. And because this is separate, the Veterans Benefit Association or Administration is separate from us. We're VHA, Health Administration. But we also work with them so that when we find veterans who are disabled in some way, that we can get them benefits that they deserve. Back in 2013 calendar, or 2023 calendar year, the Secretary of the VA put out a challenge to us to house 38,000 veterans nationwide. And I am happy to say that we did that. And then he asked for us to do it again, and we did that too. And so here locally, we housed with all of our partners over 300 veterans just to meet that challenge. And that was here in Tarrant County, Fort Worth. The HUD-VASH program, again, is a supportive services program, and it is a lifetime type of situation. So we don't get a whole lot of turnover because we do have veterans that stay for the remainder of their lives. But one of the problems that we're having, just like everyone else has talked about, is the lack of housing or lack of people landlords who want to take the vouchers, especially if they've had a previous bad experience with a veteran. So we have some real issues with that. Right now, we have housed with vouchers, with the VASH vouchers, 431 veterans that are housed. We've got 56 right now who are searching and 72 who we are waiting to award vouchers to. And so our total allocation for Fort Worth and Tarrant County is 559 vouchers. We're hoping to get more. However, with the housing stock the way it is, we probably won't get HUD to do that for us until we can do something better on this side. One other thing that I would like to mention is that we also work with our supportive services for veteran families programs, which consist of Recovery Resource Council, VOA, Endeavors, and American GI Forum. And those programs are funded by the VA, but they do a different thing. We provide the housing, but they can provide all of those other things that can't be provided. For example, you know, the application fees, the deposits, and then that extra administrative thing that they're charging everybody for that probably is more than the deposit. But our SSVF providers can help with that. They can also help get veterans housed as they wait to be housed with the VA and HUD-VASH. So that's kind of the crux of what we do. We are enjoying our relationship with the COC. We believe that the COC is what holds us all together. It's the glue that makes us all work and make sure that we partner with each other. And there's not anything that I've ever had to ask the COC staff or whomever for help with that I didn't get. And so we really appreciate the COC. We appreciate TCHC. So that's
Thank you
all
very
I
much
have.
for your presentation. Charlie?
You know, I was going to say something, so I'll make it quick. So, you know, recently, because of Council Member Beck's initiative to get a new position for the VA coordinator here in Fort Worth, I'm assuming that you'll work closely, hand in hand with that individual, and if they're not reaching out to you, then certainly let us know, and we'll make sure that the introduction's made.
Absolutely.
But did you say there's 72 currently on that VASH wait list, or that's 72 that they've already been approved, now they're just waiting on the housing?
No,
or?
there's 72 vouchers that are awaited to be awarded. And that means that we're waiting on someone to be able to get their critical documents and all that stuff. So they will work with Bruce and all of his people to get those so we can send them on to the Housing Authority. But that's only 72. The actual, and we don't call it a wait list, we call it an interest list. The actual interest list has over 200 people in it.
Okay. Got it. Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions, council? No? Great presentation. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, council, I'm reading the room. It's a lot of information. Fatigued, yes. I propose what we do is take back this information, and then I'll work with David and CMO to maybe carve out 30 minutes, 45 minutes at the top of a work session in the next few weeks to sort of bring back your comments and questions. It could coincide maybe when you're bringing the M&C on the pilot. I don't know when that's going to be, Fernando, if you know, in March. So maybe that works okay. So between now and then, working with CMO, any concerns you had, what you heard today, or positive comments, and then we'll allow more time in that work session since that M&C will be coming to council. Does that sound good? Any closing comments from council members? Yes, ma'am.
It's been very helpful, very informative to me. I think this council is made the better on one particular item just because we have two veterans on this council.
Yeah, I agree.
And I truly respect their input. One thing that it's important that we all realize is no matter what our individual desires and wishes are, we may not have a unanimous vote on this, and we have to respect each other. And so I would just add that to my takeaway from today. And I hope you didn't look at my facial expression and think I was fading fast. So,
No.
Okay, because I'm good.
Kidding, it was Alan. Just kidding, just kidding. No, Michael, please.
thanks again, Mayor, for pulling this together too, and for all the people that have played a part. It's a complicated issue. One thing I would like to see if this comes back to us, and Elaine Close would kill me if I didn't bring it up, is children. We haven't really hit on the homeless children and that aspect of it. I know she's gone, but I know she's still watching too. But she and I have talked about that a lot, obviously her history and everything else. But thank you for bringing this up. In the end, I think we all want to do the right thing. It's really about people, making sure they're taken care of and that the citizens, residents are taken care of. So
Very
thank you.
well said.
And
Macy.
Michael, with children, the way they have to move around from school to school.
Yeah, absolutely. Macy.
I really learned a lot today, and I thank you for your time because there was a lot of information. It was very helpful. When we go back and have our conversation, I want to make sure that we do sit down and really address poverty and mental and substance abuse and illness, because I do think that's sort of the root causes. And you saw the chart, we have a little small block dedicated to prevention. And I just want to make sure that we're aware of that because, like you said, these are people. We want to make sure we're doing the work effectively and humanely, and we're doing the right thing for them in the beginning and the end when they move into housing. So I'd like to challenge us to do that.
Any other closing comments from council? No? Tara, great job, and your team for putting all this together. We appreciate it. To Fernando, Lauren. It does take a team effort, and the COC does work very well. And so I think we're an example for the rest of the country. Council, I will adjourn. I'll see everybody at 6.